For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button because we are just getting started.
Okay, looks like we are live tonight on Standing for Truth. This is the Aftershow for NephilimFree's debate with Leophilius. So another good win for creation as far as I'm concerned. But we got some good brothers in Christ here. We got Otangelo, we got Sal, and NephilimFree, the man of the night, the man of the hour. So Neph, great job as usual. Very impressive. You're a warrior for the faith. So brothers, how are we doing tonight?
I appreciate it. I point out that in that debate, I asked Leo for evidence for the mechanism for evolution repeatedly, and he wouldn't even address it, except to repeatedly say that changes to allele frequency after I brought that up was the mechanism itself. But we all know that by itself, changes to allele frequency is not a mechanism for evolution. You know, you have to have genetic change that can then be spread in the population. So Leo completely failed to provide an argument for evolution, except to repeatedly declare that it's a scientific fact. And that was a failure.
I completely agree. What are your opinions, brothers? Actually, Sal, typically your mic is perfect. Right now I hear maybe it's a fan. Is there a fan on somewhere? Is it just me, or can you hear a little bit of fuzziness?
You might have heard the car traffic behind me. Maybe I'll close the door, or
it could have been that.
Is it still going?
Actually, it sounds kind of good now. Yeah, I heard a little bit of fuzzy noise, like some feedback.
Yeah,
but just okay.
Yeah, we got guys just showing off their cars.
No problem. So Sal, what do you think of the debate? No, that's okay. That's okay.
And thank you, NephilimFree, for engaging these guys. And I'm just really honored to have a chance to just express my thanks. You guys have supported me a lot, and it was kind of fun, just kind of distract. I showed up in the chat, and Leophilius started arguing with me. And it's like, dude, you're in the middle of a debate.
He's having a chat debate with Sal, and he's having a live debate on MDD with Neph.
It's like, dude, am I getting under your skin? He was saying, he said, I didn't even tag him. I just said, I just asking a general question. Is Leophilius a scientist? I mean, I just wanted to know. Apparently he was insulted by that. He said, I'm not a scientist, and neither are you. And I said, well, actually, I was a former scientist. I was a junior scientist before I got promoted to senior engineer. And he said, well, you're not a biologist. I said, well, I probably have more biology publications than you. It's like, okay, you want to debate me right in the middle of your debate?
Well, I told him in the chat, Sal, when he said that to you, I said, brother Sal forgets more things in one day than you've probably learned your entire life.
I missed that.
I couldn't believe that he thought he could even come close to, what you've done in your qualifications. So Sal, you've been an incredible blessing. You've taught us so much. So
that was my way of trying to just express my thanks for when you supported me on my debates. I said, I'll just give your opponent a little bit of a hard time right in the middle of this debate.
Well, one thing I noticed, Neph, I think if I were to debate Leophilius, he's way too excited, because the second the opening statements were done, okay, it was then fair for you to, I think you begun the discussion, but within 3 seconds he was interrupting you and you couldn't get a word in. It's opponents like that where I would demand equal time, just because here's the thing about the evolution. When their worldview
That's why I wanted James to keep it timed. I mean, he didn't do that. And I'm not citing James for that. He's just trying to keep it going quickly.
Yeah, he did. He did good.
Yeah, he did. But it would be better if it was on a timer, 2 minutes apiece, going back and forth, because that prevents any of that, from happening.
Yeah, it's not James. It's not his fault. He did a great job. It's just right off the bat, Leophilius was just way too excited. But here's the thing: he was taking on, the great Neph in front of an audience of 400 people. So he definitely wanted to come across as. Actually, it looked like he was coming across as an Aaron Ra there.
Well, if he could only have answered my questions and provided, scientific evidence that evolution is true by showing a mechanism for it, but he was unable to do that, didn't even address that requirement. I asked him repeatedly throughout the debate, show us the mechanism for this. What's the scientific evidence that controverts what's published in the journals, that genetic mutation has been observed for 90 years to be a destroyer of genetic information and a creator of disease? What is the evidence that it builds the structural designs of living things over time? Show us the incremental changes that it causes to the body plan of creatures. Where is the evidence for that? And of course, he can't address that. No evolutionist can, because it is no such thing as a mechanism. Modern science has refuted that idea, and the evolutionists are stuck with believing it, but they can't cite examples because there are none.
Well, they can't. And the thing is, me and Sal, we did a discussion / lecture a few days ago, and I think the evolutionists are still losing sleep over it. They probably haven't slept since, because, Brother Sal, you did an amazing job. I re-listened to it because we titled it The Worthless Definition of Fitness, because they're beneficial mutations, which they require. They're so rare that when they do happen, for the most part, they're reductive. And Sal did a great job on just going over the number of reasons why the evolutionist definition of fitness is worthless. And anybody who hasn't checked it out yet, definitely check it out. Sal, I want to thank you again for that one. Brother Sal, I think you're on mute. We want to hear what you got to say. There you go.
Sorry.
No problem.
Actually, I was hoping we'd have another showing of Speed of Sound.
Speed of Sound, yeah.
Let's see if I can remember it from memory. Maybe the best thing for the human race is we get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds.
Wow.
That's literally what they think's going to take their fish to fishermen.
And I was like, oh goodness. When he said that, I said, did I really just hear? You heard it, Otangelo, didn't you? So I'm sorry. I actually misplaced my my copy of that, and I think maybe I ought to go easy on the old man, because he's my friend. I don't want to get under his skin and make an enemy out of him.
Well, I don't know why he still fights it. Like you were talking about. I mean, according to the evolution definition of fitness, your beetles that lost their wings on the windy islands, for adaptive purposes, that's an increase in fitness according to them, when in fact it's reductive. So I don't know why they're still. We talked about that, Sal. Why are they still arguing against this? It's common sense, it's logical, it's scientific, but.
Neff, did you see it?
Did I see which one? I'm sorry.
Okay.
With the you mean the one with?
Okay, I think I found it. If you could indulge me for.
Yeah, if you want to share screen.
If you can indulge me for 20 seconds, I think I have it right here. So let me share my screen. And so, guys, for people who are saying that genetic entropy isn't real, we got it from the horse's mouth here.
Oh my goodness. What a ridiculous thing to say, he said.
The best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber.
Sal, did you want to share screen or just do the audio?
I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive.
I had to share screen on. Did you approve it?
No, because we got, okay, here we go. It's at my bad. I didn't even see it. Okay, we're good. If you want to restart it, Sal.
Okay, this is for you, Neff.
Okay.
Thing. It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it. That's thing. It could well be the best thing for the human
Oh
race
my
to
gosh.
get
Look at
dumber
Sal
and
trying to
dumber
hold back his laugh.
until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it.
Oh my word.
Yeah,
Oh
this
my
is,
gosh. So I guess let's apply that to all other species, not just humans, right? So organisms should just evolve towards to get stupider and stupider. But what is that going to do for their fitness? If they lose their intelligence, how is that going to affect their ability to survive? Don't you think it will? I mean, what a mind-numbingly stupid thing to say, truly.
well, Sal, you gave. Oh, go ahead, Sal. No,
go on. Well, first of all, speed of sound, we've been on pretty good terms, but he has a habit of just like having 2-hour shows about us and what we say. I'm not commenting on what he said. I'm just showing what he had to say. Now let me share my screen.
If he can give it, he better be able to take it. Yeah, it looks like we got Neff. I shared your screen on that entropy. Do you want me to share your screen again, Sal?
Just briefly, this one is actually echoing what.
There we go.
I looked this up. This is echoing what Speed of Sound said. It's pointing out here, like the last few sentences, it says, 1 standard deviation increase in childhood general intelligence, which is 15 IQ points, decreases women's odds of parenthood by 21 to 25%. Because women have a greater impact on the average intelligence of future generations, the dysgenic fertility among women is predicted to lead to a decline in the average intelligence of the population in advanced industrial nations. The point of this is that natural selection here is demonstrated to be destroying IQ. It's slowly degrading it. It's assumed that natural selection builds IQ. Every measurement and direct observation we have is natural selection actually makes things worse. So in a funny way, this is a peer-reviewed article, and there are probably many more that are coming that will point that out, that not just intelligence, but other things are selected for, like, say, Tay-Sachs disease and was it sickle cell anemia? So as funny as it sounded, we may be laughing at speed of sound. He's accurate in that he's saying we're getting dumber and dumber, but I wouldn't say it's the best thing for the human race. That's what's not too swift on his part. So that's all I had to say.
Well, no, it's such a good point, because we've seen it. I was in a debate recently on Modern Day Debate with a pretty popular YouTuber, Team Skeptic, and that's what he brought. He threw out sickle cell anemia near the end of the debate as a so-called beneficial mutation, the type that, can take your single-celled like ancestor into a whale over billions of years, right? The type of novel change. And yet we've talked about it, Sal, over and over again, that it's ultimately reductive. There's an advantage. Yeah, there's an advantage to be had, a narrow increase in fitness, but it's due to what? A broken cell, broken protein. It's reductive. It's function compromising, as you always say. And I think this is why they constantly have to, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is why I think, because I've been hearing it a lot lately. Neff, you've probably been hearing it. They'll try and say that evolution doesn't have a direction. Up, down, left, right. It's all evolution. But I think they're forced to admit that now, because mutations are overwhelmingly deleterious, like you correctly pointed out tonight, Neff. And then most of their beneficial mutations are reductive. So they have no choice but to resort to that.
Well, and they contradict that when they say the geologic column shows a progression of complexity going upward through the strata, which is not exactly true. So that's contradictory. So they contradict themselves all the time, of course, about many things. So this is one of the things that causes people to believe evolution is true, because they believe some of the myths. One of them is that the geologic column demonstrates that everything is organized in a nice, neat order, going upward from the simplest organism to the more complex. And that's not exactly the case. There are dozens upon dozens of discordant fossils in places they are not expected to be, according to evolution theory, and the evolutionists just don't like talking about those.
Well, they're saying now that reductive evolution and that genetic entropy is just a term used by creationists, and that's simply not true. And I think Sol has just shown a paper which is not coming from our camp. So that is a confirmed thing. Now, it is interesting that I've not seen the whole debate tonight. I was at my channel, but when I chimed in and saw some sections. So the evolutionary debate goes also always around fossils and that kind of stuff, transitions. And I think this is simply irrelevant because the real mechanisms, they are seen in molecular biology, and we have to check what the mechanisms actually are, which are really in place to make organismal form and architecture. And we know that it is not just genetics; it is far more epigenetics and signaling. And many of these epigenetic languages, they cannot be the product of evolution. They had to be created.
SFT, are you still there? Oh, I think it's just you and me, Otangelo.
Yeah, he said that he would be.
I wanted to ask how people are able to be alerted to these StreamYard streams live. I'm thinking about partly for my church, and then also some of my work in Christian evidence, reasons, and apologetics. Maybe having a regular twice weekly show, small segments, not these long ones that are a couple hours long. And I don't know how people are able to be alerted, because whenever Standing for Truth starts a stream, they're just like 10 people immediately, which I think is really neat. So
if you are subscribed, then you probably get an alert when something is live.
So if someone in the chat knows, I'd be appreciative. I don't know how to use Twitter and Facebook to do announcements and stuff. So, and then alerts. Some people use emails. So I'm trying to navigate.
Yeah, usually I put a link to a live chat at my Facebook page and timeline when I go live, as I did tonight, and then people. But my results have not been very encouraging. I've not seen many people of my Facebook friends coming over to a chat at YouTube when it's live. So I don't know what the reason is, but I've not seen big increase of listeners.
I'd be happy to have just a few listeners that are Christians and creationists and sympathetic people on the fence. I don't want to be flooded with atheists. They're just the hardened type. The polite type I'll deal with, but some of these hardened ones and these evolutionists, it's just really not productive use of time, because there's so many of them, and a lot of times they just want to spam the channel. So I want to avoid doing that. One thing that I am looking into, we heard Rob Stadler on this channel. He co-authored the book with Change Tan, The Stairway to Life. Change Tan is a molecular cell biologist at University of Missouri, very smart. She and I might be trying to do a public domain molecular biology course at the college level, and it might be available through YouTube. Her English isn't quite is not as fluent as mine, and I'm looking at being able to use kind of more dynamic graphics to help illustrate points, and a little bit snazzier narration and presentation. So I was involved in computer-based training of pilots, and we could train pilots 30 times faster with computer-based training than traditional classroom methods. There are a number of reasons for that. So that's why I was curious. And so maybe if Standing for Truth joins us, he might be able to explain.
Otangelo, I watched your review of my debate with someone, and I thought that your comments were excellent. You were very quick to point out immediately the errors of my opponent. That was really well done. I just wanted to tell you I saw that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that there is so much information out there, and in regards of evolution, and it is still the gene-centric view, and I don't understand why people are not starting to see that organism complexity just doesn't come only from genes. And I mean that the gene regulatory network, for example, plays a central role. This is very widely known, and people are simply ignoring that still today. And I don't know what the reason is for that. And today we have to see organismal complexity from a holistic and systems biology view, where many factors are playing integratedly together to build organisms. And that starts with the shape of each cell, each individual cell. Like you see that a neuron has a completely different shape as a blood cell. And that has to be explained before you start to try to explain the form of a complete organism, which is much more complex. And I've studied that. And the mechanisms which are involved in just shaping one cell, there are so many different mechanisms in place, and they are not just genetic. Basically, what you see as a general scheme is that many different information systems, they direct mechanistically inside of the cell what has to be done. And there are mechanistical forces in place, like the microtubules, there are anchors at the cell membrane, there are the kinesins and dyneins, which also are involved in pushing and stretching. And then there are different skeletons which make the form of the cell, like the actins and microtubules and so forth. And they have all a play in shaping the form of a cell. And that is directed by different kinds of information and many signaling pathways. Yes. So it is much, much more complex than just genetic information. And this is completely ignored in these debates. They target transitional forms, fossil forms, they target genetic variation, but the real action happens in what I'm describing now. This is completely ignored.
Yeah, it is ignored, Otangelo, and that is why Tony Paulson, cell biologist at the University of Toronto, who is a member of the Human Genome Project, wrote in their efforts to map out the interdependencies, the relationships between the various thousands of proteins in the human cell, they concentrated on just the p53, and they attempted to map out all of the interactions between the p53 and the DNA and other proteins, and they literally threw their hands up and said, we can't do it, it's infinitely complex, because the signaling pathways. And he said in his discussion of that with the press, he said, we now know, I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he didn't say these exact words, but this is what he alluded to. He said that we now know that the signaling pathways in the cell is a gigantic myriad of complexity. It's not simple and discrete pathways like we used to believe. It's infinitely more complex. Yeah. So that goes along exactly with what you said. It is a gigantic operating system of hundreds and hundreds of signaling pathways that cause tiny changes and modifications and functions in the cell that make a cell a living thing, making a functional factory. It's not simple. And that complexity just flies in the face of evolution, because evolution cannot even begin to address this. I'd like to point out also in my debate with Leo, he alluded that changes to allele frequency in a population is a sufficient mechanism for evolution. But of course, that's nonsense.
Yeah.
You have to have the genetic information change, then spread it throughout the population for an organism to move towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism. If you don't, you're only spreading the same information and the organism remains the same. So he utterly failed to explain how his ideas could be correct, and actually skirted the very question of where is this mechanism for evolution by alluding falsely that changes to allele frequency is a sufficient explanation for evolution.
Yeah,
And that's
this
simply
is
not
a
the
very naive view, which it's generally hold that the basic mechanisms, which is natural selection, mutations, genetic drift and flow, that on genes, that they explain all the complexity. But if you look, for example, the human body has 37 trillion cells, and the genome has 3 billion nucleotides. Now, each of these cells, I have listed 18 different things that have to be specified, like the cell form, what cell each cell has to become, where it is placed in the body, how many cell cycles there can be. I can eventually even put it on the screen. And all this has to be specified. And if you just check in regards of one of these 18 different points, it is extremely complex. Like, for example, just to specify, as I said before, the form of each cell, this is, and what kind of cell that each cell has to become from the first cell, from the pluripotent cell. Well, these mechanisms, they are very complex, and they are not just genetic. It's not just genetic information. It is many different kind of mechanisms that are in place, which are involved in this.
My opponent also made a mistake of saying, alluding near the end of the debate, that recombination of existing alleles is also a sufficient mechanism for evolution. The reason he did this, I think, is because he knew that he was unable to provide an example whereby a reason from a body of evidence whereby we have reason to believe that random mutation modifying genes produces the information that's capable of changing the structural design of an organism so that it moves towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism, so that anatomy will change over time. He knew he couldn't provide evidence of a mechanism for that. So he made this error of alluding that recombining existing alleles is a sufficient mechanism. How the various information in the existing alleles in an organism, how those are expressed in different patterns, is going to be able to provide the changes to the structural design of an organism that will modify it so that it moves towards becoming a fundamentally different type of organism. We don't have any evidence of that.
No.
There's no scientific reason to believe that recombining alleles in a population produces the structural design changes necessary for evolution to be true. There's no more evidence for that than there is for evidence that random mutations modify genetic information to create the new information that does the same. So that was also a great error on my opponent. Instead of providing evidence, he simply claimed that things that cannot be mechanisms for evolution were mechanisms for evolution without being able to cite a reason for believing it.
Yeah, it's a very naive view. I don't know if Standing for Truth is here, but you could put here. Can you put on the screen my list, please?
Yeah, of course. Are you? And also, I just wanted to. Real quick, because I wanted to also acknowledge we've got Brother Chris Keith here. We got Brother Joel here. Joel, good to have you on. I think this might be your first time on my specific channel. So I love what you do, man. You're highly intelligent as well. And yeah, thanks for being here to the both of you guys. You guys are awesome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, me and Joe have a lot of great talks at night. And Nephilim, you did very good in the debate, buddy.
I appreciate it. Me and Chris had a really long talk the other night. He stuck around one of my hangouts for hours. Dude, you are a warrior, man.
I've been following you, Neff. I've been following you since 2008, brother.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, SFT. And I'm an information guy. If you guys have questions on information science.
Well, how? Yes, didn't you say in one of my live streams that you have a degree in information science?
Yes, sir. I just finished my master's in information systems.
Master's in information science. That's correct. I remember you saying that. So let me ask you a question before we go on. Does information require a sender and a receiver?
Absolutely, a reader and writer. Yes, sir.
Do they have to speak the same language?
Yes.
Okay.
The bulk of what we do in information science is trying to not just combine, but create new ways of translating. Yeah.
Are the physical properties of something, does that constitute information?
Not normally. No, that's the medium that the information is transferred.
Well, no, let me give you an example. The properties of the sun. So we examine, let's say we look at the sun and do the properties of the sun, its intensity, the convolutions of its material, it's expelling matter into space, the light frequencies of that it emits. Are these information?
The sun itself, I don't know. I wouldn't assume to say so. I mean, it can be if you're trying to transmit something through photon.
So, well, I mean, you could use it as a medium. You're saying?
Oh yeah,
theoretically, right? But are these properties themselves information?
As if they're not conveying something with a purpose, no.
No, there you go. So information is knowledge conveyed from a sender to a receiver using a language agreed upon by both parties. And the properties of the sun, the physical properties of matter themselves are not information. They can only be a medium for conveying information. I have debated so many evolutionists that argue falsely that matter itself constitutes information, that information is a material quantity instead of a non-material quantity, which arises only from intelligence. And this is a huge scientific failure of evolutionists and materialists, whereby they deny the accrued knowledge of man. In all of our information theory science, they deny all of it, the basis of it, in order to argue for philosophical materialism. It's just sad to see. It's a train wreck.
Leo has made the same mistake, and I asked him at my debate about the abiogenesis what was the difference between software and hardware. And they basically came precisely what you are pointing out, Neff. They say that information is physical. Yeah. And when you press them harder, then they say, yeah, well, that's because the brain produces consciousness and intelligence. And because of that, of course, the brain is physical. Then our thoughts and our intelligence also is physical, but that is of course not true.
And also they tend to point out, well, you can't have information without some kind of physical thing. It has to exist for information. Well, that's true. They're just pointing out that you need a physical medium in order to convey information. You can't share information without a material thing, because Ray, we're stuck in a material world. You can't do anything without matter, right? But that doesn't make the information material. It just means the medium. So what they're doing is they're confusing, they're conflating the material medium with the information itself.
You know what?
In order to argue for philosophical materialism, and that's a failure.
Stephen Meyer has an excellent example. Have you seen him use his like little chalkboard he has, and the magnetic letters will stick to the
or the child's toy?
It is showing that showing that you get the base pairs, but that doesn't necessarily, the bond isn't what even makes the message, or that requires each of the letters to pair up. So
there's no physical determinacy. Any A, C, G, or T can bond to any location on the sugar ribose molecule of DNA. It's not determined. Now, there is an interdependency between one strand and the other, which base pair can be on what side, because this one bonds only with that one. But on any given strand, there's no chemical determinacy which determines that a or a C or a G or a T must be at this location. It's not determined by chemical determinacy. So then what ordered it to create coded information? That's where an intelligence comes in. Sal could probably discuss that more with us. Sal, can you share any information about that?
Well,
Isn't
I
it
wanted to include something, gentlemen. We can
Yeah,
simplify this
yeah, but when you're
incredibly.
done, I'd like for Sal to tell us a little bit, if you can, about how that's true. That because I'm sure Sal knows about how the chemical determinacy doesn't determine which base pair is attached to what location on the sugar ribose molecule. Sal can probably elucidate that. So go ahead.
There's not. It's very much like there's not. The way to describe it is that if you have Scrabble, a bunch of Scrabble pieces, there's not an inherent tendency for them to assemble into coherent words. And so when they say that there's not a chemical, there's not a chemical inevitability that DNA sequences will form spontaneously into a way that's coherent. In fact, that's a very important property, because if they had a very strong tendency, like say to be just one given sequence, you can't form genes, because then you'll only have one gene.
Right, but isn't it true, Sal, that the bonding sites along the sugar ribose molecule don't require that a cytosine, adenine, guanine, or thymine must attach to this one, and one of those must attach here? That's not true of the sugar ribose molecule.
They are unconstrained. You can have any sequence.
It's not a very nice term. It's promiscuous binding. So I don't know a better way to describe it. It's just like it, the idea of promiscuous binding is it's not tied to one thing.
Right.
It's free. There have been theories about, there's some bias toward certain kinds of bonds, but it would be an insufficient explanation. Not to mention across species, we see nucleotide bias, which is still unexplained. Why some bacteria have an abundance of one nucleotide over,
such as thymine,
and then humans also, in eukaryotes, they have an excess of one class. And I'm embarrassed to say this, I'm actually not a genetics person. I'm more of a protein guy, and maybe only 10 proteins at that. So.
Okay. Well, let me point this out, and then I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. I'll be right back. But I'll point out that the tendency is towards thymine. The truth is, when a random mutation changes a base pair, a single nucleotide variant, in polymorph in the DNA, it tends to replace that base pair with thymine more often than with A, C, or G. A, C, or G. So essentially, genetic mutations are ever so slowly transforming our genome into a thymine. And that can't be good. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get a cup of coffee.
Joel, you were going to say something? You want to go ahead?
Oh yeah, I was going to just try to. I like to keep things a lot more simplified.
Yeah, go ahead.
The idea of basically data streams without purpose, without a cognizant sender receiver agent, like you were talking about. We call that noise in information science. It's useless. It's not information. And like Lena was talking about, what's referred to as Shannon information. That's what's called stochastic source of data. That again, it's random. It's not actual information. It's just noise. Information science, we work very hard to take essential noise, take what we call disparate data streams and make them non-disparate, so that they can actually be useful and understandable. And because everything we try to do in information is to meet a customer's needs, essentially, trying to meet a goal. And so that requires taking basically a lot of, like I said, disparate information, things that aren't translated properly, things that normally don't make sense to somebody, and make it make perfect sense to somebody with a specific reason and specific purpose. So yeah, I was wanted to kind of convey that. Next time you hear an evolutionist talk about information or whatever, and it's like a Neff's analogy about the sun sending information, whatever, that's just noise.
Yeah, SFT cannot put on the. He could put on the screen here. I have written a paper information on this. And there are at least four interdependent requirements to have an information transmission system, which is first the language, then the information, the message, which is produced upon that language. Then third, the information storage mechanism, which is a hard disk paper or the DNA, the genome. And then fourth, an information transmission system, which is encoding, sending, and decoding, which we have in cells, which is RNA polymerase makes the transcription. The messenger RNA is the sender, and then the ribosome is the receiver, which at the same time also, that's the fifth point, makes the translation from one language to another language. And these are at least four interdependent things that which work together in order to have an information transmission system. And here you have it. The language that are the symbols, that is like our alphabet, A, B, C, and so forth, which you use. And then the information, which is the message, like you can write a chair, and then you have the transmission system. You send it, like we can use email or paper, send it, or in the cell, what I described before. And then the decoding, and then fifth, the translation, which in the cell is the ribosome. And each of these four things has to be specified. And in regards of the language, that's the genetic code, which is also the translation system. Then the information, that's the sequence of the nucleotides in the genome, which is not non-constrained, as you guys pointed out. Then the information storage mechanism, which is the DNA molecule, which is the genome. And then the transmission system, which are the proteins, RNA polymerase, and the ribosome, and the messenger RNA.
And it seems elementary, but that's the reason that they'll have to deny it's a code. You know, it's not analogous to a code; it is a code. And once they do, then they have to admit that codes can spontaneously form, even though over time, either way, they're still admitting that codes can arise on their own.
Well,
it's not just a code, though, either.
The crux is that there is an assignment of 61 codons and 3 start and stop codons, which are assigned to the amino acids, to the 20 amino acids.
Which is not random.
And that assignment is precisely the big problem, which they cannot explain how that could have emerged non-guided without intelligence. Why? Because we know that only intelligence can assign meaning from one thing to something else, like a chair in English to shizi in Chinese. That assignment is without exception intelligent based and made by intelligence. And that's a big problem for naturalism. They cannot overcome that hurdle, because information only comes from intelligence.
Right. And again, that's not just code. What you're describing there, Antonio, that's called universal information. So DNA is, by definition, it's a universal information codic set, which is compression, decompression. It's three-dimensional, it's bidirectional. It's an information transfer protocol technology.
Yeah, and you said the genome can be read in both ways, back and forwards, and
bidirectional.
How do you explain that?
It's beyond code. I don't know an accurate.
That is the big information problem, and
it's universal information.
And this is one aspect. And how do you explain the relationship between information, between the entire system of information, and which is directing not only the making of proteins, but also how the cell, it controls, the information controls the behavior of the cell.
Exactly. Regulatory networks, regulatory genes, and proteins that regulate the expression of other genes over vast distances on the DNA molecule. This kills evolution theory by itself, like so many things does, because interdependency in chemistry If materialism were true, then there's no way to explain this complexity of living systems if the molecules would be completely interdependent with other molecules over vast distances from each other. That can't be explained by any kind of abiogenesis or evolutionary process. This is something that had to have been designed in the beginning. A function is assigned to something that it's completely physically unrelated to in a different location. And in fact, the very existence of the protein that does the regulation of the information for another protein, or maybe the very gene that produces that same protein, it's convoluted interdependence. You can't explain that with evolution. It just screams of design.
Yeah, you have morphogen proteins, for example, which direct the arrangement of other cells where they have to be directed in order to make a tissue, for example. And this is not genetic information, it is signaling. And where that signaling comes from, science has no idea. Science doesn't know how the signaling information is stored in the cell. But we know, for example, now that the central nervous system directs the cells where they belong in the organism, in the body. And that is also not genetic information. So you have to assign where that information comes from. And when you want to explain organismal form and organismal architecture, then you have to account for that kind of information. And that would be the information that would have to change in order to change the organismal form. And this is the signaling on long distance. That is not just in a cell, that is also on intracellular and extracellular signaling, and cells which communicate with each other, and also the nervous system, which is another information system. So there are many layers of information which have to be explained, and you would have to change all these layers of information in order to change an organismal form. And it has to be in a coordinated way, in a coordinated manner. You cannot change just with a single mutations or with a bunch of mutations in a genome an entire construct of an organism. That takes much more than just that. And you have also the organism, the arrangement of chromatins in the nucleus, and even that physical aspect also organizes the information of how organisms and bodies are formed. It is much more than just genetic information. And that thinking has to change.
Yeah, exactly. And here's an example of that. The structural design of the cell itself constitutes an entire library of information that's not encoded in the DNA. For example, the exact form of the proteins that comprise the ATP synthase machine is so incredibly precise. You know, it has mechanical levers and whatnot that change the force, the change in the shape of molecules in order to do its work. And this is interdependent with the shape of the ATP molecule itself. How did that interdependence arise? How do you get proteins coded in the DNA to have interdependence with molecular, with structural designs, organelles and whatnot in the cell, so that they are necessary for the function of the cell? That's a conundrum for evolution that evolution simply can't answer. There's an entire library of information found in the structural design of the features of the cell that is not in the genome. That's
now you see that. You know. Now you see, just to specify each cell, I've listed here 18 different things that have to be specified, and most of these things, they are not specified through genetic information but epigenetic information, and over 25 different epigenetic languages and signaling networks, and that has to be explained. And genetic information simply doesn't do it. It is a naive understanding of how biology works.
And don't you find that naivete is expressed in so much of what the evolutionists say? Evolutionists continuously attempt to dumb down things, to simplify. They talk in a way so as to make it sound like it's also very simple. And in fact, the cell is simple. They tend to describe the cell in genetics as though it's all simple, and because the complexity of it, they know, is a great problem for evolution. They can't account for it. So they attempt to dumb it down. And I've heard evolutionists so many times in debate with them attempt to talk about the cell as though it's remarkably simple in comparison to what it really is. They think they do this because they think that if they can make it seem like these things are all vastly simpler than what we as science has discovered them to be, then it's much more plausible that natural selection and mutation and whatnot, any kind of evolutionary natural mechanism could explain it if it's less complex than what we really know it to be. I find that to be a separate form of, just another form of science denialism by the evolutionist, by attempting to describe things as though they're much simpler than we know that they actually are, which is mind-bendingly complex. And the more that we study it, the more complexity we discover. Was it, I forgot who it was, Leon Margulis, I believe, the famous evolutionist, PhD turned writer, who said that the more that scientists study microbiology, it seems to be like a Mandelbrot set. The complexity we find more and more and more and more levels of complexity the more we discover about microbiology. The complexity just never seems to end, like there's not an end to it. And that flies in the face of the naturalist.
Now, I would like to show here just one of the 18 points which I pointed out before, which is the morphogenesis of a eukaryotic cell. You need the following activities are performed by at least 36 different signaling molecules and mechanisms. 8 molecules signal, 4 orient, 5 activate, 2 direct, 3 promote, 2 regulate, 1 guides, 3 organize, 1 informs, 1 coordinates, 1 specifies, 1 modulates, 1 provides position cues, 2 mediate, and 1 provoke change. And you have an entire web-like structure here with spectrines, actins, microtubules, and the extracellular matrix. And all these, they are involved in shaping a cell. So, hey, think about it. 36 different signaling molecules and mechanisms which are not only genetic, they are all epigenetic. So the picture here changes completely. And I mean, hey, you can just forget the evolutionary narrative. It's just nonsense. And what I am showing here, this is all what I have investigated by secular peer-reviewed science papers. That is not just fantasy made up by me.
That's awesome information, Otangelo. You need a whole factory full of guys, not just one or two. You got to have a whole team of mechanics to make the motor, put the engine together. That's great information, because it demonstrates the astonishing complexity of genetic, the relationship between genetic information and the structural design and function, biological function of a cell. It's not, simple. It's not, a pathway where, 1 or 2 guys can make a profound change. They work in teams. These mechanisms work in teams to provide a function. Any given structural design in the cell is not the product of one guy, so to speak, a guy. It's the product of a team of functional mechanics.
Yeah.
Yes, that's awesome.
I've described just point 1 here, morphogenesis of eukaryotic cell structure and shape. The 36 informational mechanisms, they belong only in instructing morphogenesis of eukaryotic cells. But then you have still these 15 different points here, which also have to be instructed. And that is mostly epigenetic information, which makes all this here.
That's great research, Otangelo. Well done.
Yeah. And I can maybe also link to the real mechanisms which are involved in making organismal complexities. I have listed here 18 different mechanisms. First, the gene regulatory network, various signaling pathways, to at least 23 epigenetic codes, cell-cell communication, chromatin density in the nucleus, post-transcriptional modifications of histones, the DNA methylation code, homeobox and Hox gene expression, non-coding DNA, junk DNA, transposons and retrotransposons, centrosomes, arrangement of the cytoskeletal arrays, membrane targets, ion channels and electromagnetic fields, the sugar code, and the polarity genes, hormones, and morphogens growth factors, which are basically proteins which are involved in signaling. So you have here 18 different mechanisms which are involved in organismal form and development. So this kills literally the evolutionary narrative.
That's very good. I want to draw it back towards the debate that I had for a few minutes, if I could. If you watch the debate, I'd like to get your opinions about where Leo went wrong or where I went right, so that people who watch might be listening might understand how Leo can't possibly have won that debate, because he's arguing about things that are not scientifically valid, but ideas in his head. Any comments about the arguments that the things that Leo said are highly encouraged. Anybody could, if anyone could comment on the things that he said and that I said that demonstrate that Leo just did not win that debate.
Well, one point was, how you were trying to explain to him about losing information in respect to like the alleles. If you take a dog or a wolf and you're going to a Chihuahua, you've lost information. Now he would, you're going to argue that the gene may be switched off, but you're not going to be able to take a Chihuahua and bring back to a wolf. You know what I mean? It's just not going to happen. Right.
Once you lose the genetic information by recessive, by genes becoming recessive, they on a rare occasion can be expressed in a population, but it's rare. I mean, it moves towards never. We know about the examples whereby two black people have a baby and it turns out looking remarkably like a Caucasian person, or the opposite is true. And these are rare. But people can have children that look remarkably different from each other. So genes that are been dormant for a while can pop back up. It's possible that they can pop back up as functional and become expressed again. But that's not the norm. The norm is that when it becomes recessive, it's lost. It's gone. It's turned off. And the population isn't
right. The population is what he missed. Yeah.
I thought Leo's argument that the information is not lost is not true. He said based on the fact that the gene is still present in the DNA was a remarkably stupid thing to say. I hate to be so harsh, but I'm just going to have to be. The information might be there, but if it's not expressed anymore, it's a loss to the organism because it's been turned off. His argument was, well, it's not lost because the gene is still present, turned off or not. That is a remarkably stupid thing to say. It's the information is lost to the species if it's no longer expressed. Now, it's just nothing. It doesn't have any bearing on what the organism is going to be like because it's not expressed. That's a loss of information. So his argument on that it's not lost because it's still present in the organism's genome is mind-numbingly simplistic.
Yeah, I believe your point was overall was like it's a loss of function. You know what I mean? If you keep getting a loss of function, where you're going with that is that's not lead you. Because I was at a chat with Leo and about 7 other atheist evolutionists, and I used the same example of the dogs of Chihuahua. But the thing is they're like I said, you're going down. You need to go up if you're going to build something. Well, they're like, well, evolution doesn't necessarily care which direction you go into, just that you change. And there right there is the fact is where I think it's fallacious is that it just can't be change, because if you just say any change, like a fish that goes into a cave and loses its eye, that's a poor example for the evolution that the way in the direction of evolution that you would need.
Exactly. Change itself is an
Yeah.
insufficient definition of evolution. Absolutely.
It's kind of like bait and switch, but it isn't. But I mean, when they use macroevolution, and I know they hate that when we use the word macroevolution, but I'm pretty sure they came up with that word, so I'll use it.
Hey Sal, sounds like we could have a fun discussion on the Shannon information stuff, man. It's a lot different than I think you were.
Oh, we could. I just wanted to mention something about macroevolution. It's really, the problem is brutally evident in protein evolution. One class of protein cannot evolve to another. And the way to really confront evolutionists on this is to ask them, do all major protein architectures descend from one gene, one protein coding gene? Or do all proteins, it's very simple, do all genes descend from one gene, ancestral gene? They'll say no. It's very obvious. At some point, one major architecture can't evolve to another.
Great point.
Yeah.
And of course,
There's no common descent, and there's no universal common descent in proteins. There may be argued common ancestry in a certain family, even though that's somewhat dubious. But I definitely, when I start showing these FASTA sequences and I highlight the features as well as the tertiary structures, I'll say, okay, so do you expect a topoisomerase to have the same common ancestor as a collagen or a zinc finger protein? Anyone that has actually some knowledge of this, they'll punt. And in fact, I don't know any professor of biology that I've asked who's on the other side that really hates me. I say, okay, just lay it out. Do you think all genes descended from one ancestral gene? And they'll say no. And I said, so how did they all come about? So you're saying they're all orphans from the start? Did they just sort of like come out of nowhere simultaneously? I mean, they don't want to go there. They don't want to go there.
Yeah,
So
they have to posit, therefore, that the protein, to explain the different classes of proteins, the genes arose de novo by duplication events, and then subsequent mutations modified them so that they produced a different type of protein.
So
but they can't provide scientific evidence for that.
Well, actually, I'm working on a lot of creationists can't get published to do anti-evolution work, but they can do protein science work. And so I am studying some proteins that are related to this question, but we can't just be so upright. Otherwise, you'll never get published. The way a creationist gets published is to do something for cancer research, but then it has benefit to understanding evolution or the problems with it.
Right, I get
So
it.
I didn't mean to, was it Joel that wanted to talk about Shannon information? I just wanted to throw that word in. I didn't mean to ignore you, Joel.
No, it's fine. Yeah, and I don't want to interrupt the other conversation. If y'all want to talk more about genetics and stuff, that's fine too.
No, talk about anything, guys. Just,
Guys,
I want to put
I
one
will
last
leave
thing
the
before he
chat
goes into that. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. I will leave the chat because it's late here and I'm a little bit tired. So I appreciate you guys to be here and having this chat. And see you next time.
Okay, take
Thanks,
care,
Otangelo.
Otangelo.
Really great seeing you. And thank you for hosting me last week. I really appreciate you reaching out. So I might be coming back into circulation on the internet. I had to take off for a little bit because working on several papers and research projects, and then also trying to stand up Change Tan's molecular biology curriculum, which is exciting because she was Rob Stadler's lead author in the book Stairway to Life. And you saw how Rob Stadler kind of dealt with Professor Dave.
Yes.
Yeah, but I will be happy to that we can continue at my channel as well. And so when you have time, please give a hello per email and let's set up something to have a chat again at my channel.
Yes. God bless you.
Yeah, God
You
bless
too. Thanks for
everyone.
coming by,
Good night.
Sal.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Yeah.
So there's a question about Shannon information and genet and entropy. unlike a lot of creationists and ID proponents, I assiduously try to minimize discussion of that. I try to use, just as a policy, I try to use the terms that evolutionary biologists themselves use, like reductive evolution. And then also arguments that I like to use are structural arguments. And people familiar with proteins, you can actually see it. It's easier to visualize some of this because a simple structural argument was made by Fred Hoyle. He said a tornado passing through a junkyard won't make a 747.
Right.
And that's just beautifully intuitive. A lot of the way that biology works is the mechanical structure. It's just like braking an engine. Just like if you look at that ATP synthase, and NephilimFree mentioned ATP synthase, you could see that there's so many ways that this thing could go wrong. Why would random mutations assemble something that sophisticated? It's a motor. And what evolutionists will do, they'll appeal to these ridiculous phylogenetic reconstructions, which are utter garbage. It's not, even if we assume, for the sake of argument, common ancestry, a phylogenetic argument is not a mechanical argument. Why should it conspire to build something like that with its, like the multimeric C ring? I mean, there are just so many pieces that have to be fit right. And so generally when I argue for the complexity of biology, I said, I just really try to emphasize pictorial diagrams, especially the 3D simulations of the molecular machines. And that kind of makes the argument for you. It's like, well, how would random mutation make that? So many coordinated pieces have to be there at the same time. And when Michael Behe put forward his argument for irreducible complexity, even though I don't use that word, in fact, evolutionists have tried to concoct their own word, but they're avoiding it because it is kind of embarrassing when they talk about complexity, because the word fitness has fallen apart. Since Michael Behe put forward that idea, we know so much more about biology. So that was, 22 years ago? The field that has exploded, and I only learned about this field actually has a name. It's called structural biology. This is blowing open the whole issue, because now we have these visualizations. You could actually see the complexity. See, whereas before this was really like, as Behe said, this is the black box, Darwin's black box. It's less and less of a black box. We're seeing the insides of these black boxes. We've only scratched the tip of the iceberg, but we know enough now. We know more than enough now to make very solid arguments on several levels. The ATP synthase is one example. Transmembrane proteins are another example. And I have to I have not that much of an axe to grind with Jackson Wheat. He was my first debate opponent, but he said an unkind word to me about my first debate performance, and I have to now call him out on some stuff he said about transmembrane proteins. The transmembrane protein is a protein that is across a membrane. It could be across the cell membrane or organelle membrane. And I said, Jackson, how did that evolve? How did a membrane have material flow in and out of the membrane? He said it leaks in and out. I wanted to say, Jackson, you need to revisit cellular biology. That just won't work. So, I mean, we can now see this structurally. For some of those that tuned into my talk on Tangelo's channel this Sunday, I was showing how a transmembrane protein imports material in and out of the nucleus using nuclear localization signals. It's just mind-blowing. And we didn't have those simulations and those visualizations 22 years ago. But now that we do, it's just, if someone wanted to debate me on some of the specifics of evolution, I'm going to just keep showing that. So explain to the reader how this evolved. And please don't give a phylogenetic reconstruction that's just totally ridiculous. Explain it in terms of physics and chemistry.
Yeah, I've been starting to talk to a group about wanting to do more of those types of things, because one of my undergrads is in three-dimensional simulation programming.
Yeah. And I meant to get back to you, but
Was that us talking about that? Or it was I think it was another.
no,
Yeah,
it's me.
we were talking about something, but was it about simulation work?
Simulation work. I wanted
Okay.
to do those 2D diagrams like we did in the
That's right.
import and export in.
That's right.
They're funny because I got a hold of Change Tan, who's Rob Stadler's co-author for Stairway to Life,
Mhm.
and we've tentatively agreed for at least me to try to make her lectures available online, but they'd have to be redone to be in a nicer format for YouTube. And then also my English is stronger than hers, and God bless her, I wouldn't want to have to try to learn another language.
Yeah.
She's from China, and trying to learn English is kind of tough. So I commend her, and so she's working with me so that I can kind of help her with uh, making her lectures a little bit more glitzy, because it does. Her work sounds like a college lecture. For the internet, we need something a little bit more inviting.
Yeah. I think I started talking with Dr. Jim Carter, I think, recently in his group. They want to do some simulation work too. But what I was really wanting to address was Lena Powell's concerns about not using information science for a lot of these discussions. And I think really what's going on is a lot of evolutionists and just atheists in general, they really don't understand what information science is. And so there's a lot of good discussions to be had with that, including with the Shannon information type test theories and stuff like that. Even the RNA translation thing that you're bringing up, Lena, RNA, it's literally comparable to what's basically TCP/IP packets are for the internet, and that RNA requires DNA to exist to be translated from or be transcribed from.
Yeah.
And so I've made the correlation how those that want to claim that RNA could start life by itself are literally claiming that the internet could start by itself without computers. Of course, ridiculous. So, but no, there's a lot of misconception out there. I'd like to go into the details with.
That's an interesting observation. Yeah, you have to have regulation of the information. You got to have the information to regulate, right?
Well, not only that, but you have to have a purpose. You have to have a reason.
Well, that's right. Information is purposeful.
Right. So without
always purposeful.
Right. Without the purpose between the sender and the receiver,
that's right.
Then it's useless. And so DNA is the sender, ribosomes are the receiver, RNA are the data streams or packet streams.
Yeah, and the sender of the information is the mind that designed it, and the recipient is the cell on a different level as well at the same time.
Yeah, and sure, Lena. Yeah, so RNA it's like packetized information. It requires DNA. RNA is useless by itself, and it's only transcribed off of DNA chains.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone to claim that RNA can start life by itself, they're literally claiming the internet can start itself without computers.
Well, it gets worse for them than that, because the information in the RNA would have to be translated somehow, and proteins are what does that. Where do we get proteins? Well, it's genetic information. It's in the DNA. If you're going to start with RNA world hypothesis, you have to believe that the RNA is coded for proteins, but what's the machinery that translates the information to code for the protein from the RNA? Where'd that come from? You see, you have to have the machinery to translate and transcribe and translate the information, right? And those are made of protein. So it's a chicken and egg problem for the evolutionist. The proteins had to have existed along with the information encoded on the molecule, whether it's DNA or RNA. And so if RNA by itself, without proteins, does nothing, nothing.
Yeah, there's multiple forms of RNA as well, but yeah, it's all packetized information. Just like
right. Who's translating that information? You know,
well, it's designed.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of point out. So, I think it's important because I have heard a lot of atheists argue that Shannon information can explain how random information can become non-random, and it's absolutely backwards. So, Cloud Shannon, his main theory, his whole effort was trying to figure out how to reduce noise, how to prevent information loss. And so he was for example, the size equation that you were talking about, Sal. He's trying to calculate how much, basically like a function set capacity of the potential for we call it a non-random information set, an actual piece of lossless information, as they call it, before it's compressed into lossy information. He wanted to calculate what's an acceptable basically rate of loss for that information, the entropy of that information, to try to keep it so that when you retranslate it from a lossy compression state, to make it so it's still useless. And so we use the Shannon equation to try to I mean, there's all kinds of little bits and little funny, cute little words for it, to try to say, okay, well, how much information can we lose in the compression algorithm before it becomes useless? And so, you know, and then there's some parallels with that with DNA stuff, I guess, with God's designs, but it's the exact opposite of translating random information or random data into useful information. It's actually night and day. So it further reinforces the pure fact, the science, that DNA, it's not just information. It doesn't just have a purpose. It's universal information. It's identical in all genomes. You mentioned earlier the start-stop codons. That's exactly the opposite of random. My understanding is that all life, all microbes, all plants, all animals, they use the same 3 exact start-stop codons. There's some small differences. I think there's like 5 different ones for RNA, for the packets, but not DNA, not the source code. So this stuff is not only just pure information, it's non-random information. And for it to become random makes it broken. Like you guys were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of science to this stuff, this information, the ability to quantify basically reduction in information, the noise as it's called, the mutation degradation, all this stuff. There's ways to quantify it. And again, as far as information scientists are concerned, our entire career is dedicated to trying to prevent that. And I think we see that kind of technology in God's designs in life.
Absolutely. In fact, recent research has pointed to, it looks as though the very particular frequencies with which biological molecules vibrate is one of the signaling mechanisms of microbiology. The molecules vibrate at particular frequencies, and those frequencies are necessary for their arrangement in complex systems. And that's just another layer of complexity that was unknown 10 or 15 years ago that's been discovered. There's not much published on it yet, but it's a budding field. But it looks as though, if the research is correct, the frequency with which different biological molecules vibrate is part of what creates or interdependencies and allows for complexity in biological systems. And that's yet another level of design, in my opinion.
Yeah, the RNA DNA sequencing, it's not just a machine. It's beyond amazing. So we try to compare these things best we can to our binary code systems, but God's design, it's a quad bit physical substrate of information. It's just so entirely and basically almost impossibly small down to the molecular and atomic level, like Nephilim's talking about. It's still information. It's using floppy disks at the atomic level.
Mm.
You would think they would have some kind of, if they were going to have some kind of precursor, it would be like maybe 2-bit or something. You know what I mean?
Well, see, and that would help explain some sort of evolution, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't all universal, but it is. It's all universal. We have zero evidence of DNA being anything other than the way it's constructed now.
Yeah, an ERT 4-bit and an inert 4-bit code. You know.
That's what I would. When I was first started to really get into a lot of this stuff years and years ago, those were my questions. Like, where's the non-quad bit? Version of this stuff? How did it change from where it is now? And there's just none evidence of. I've heard people try to say, well, the way current life is, it ate up all the other life. I'm like, what? Why would you believe it?
Swallowed the back.
Yeah. Doki posts in the text chat, why does monophyly help evolution story? I don't understand why Leo kept saying it. Well, it's self-contradictory in a way. What he's saying is fish will only produce fish, apes will only produce apes and whatnot. But the story of evolution posits that fish produced amphibian tetrapods, which produced reptilian tetrapods, which produced birds. That doesn't really follow the law of monophily, does it? I mean, it depends on how you constrict it. What is the segment that you're looking at, your sample? If you're looking at it in small evolutionary terms, you might see that this law holds true. But if you're looking at the bigger picture of evolution theory, that law doesn't exist. Because evolutionists claim creatures morphed into fundamentally different types of creatures. That's the very basis for the evolution theory, the common ancestry for all the kinds of living things. So that goes outside this law. See? So for him to point to this and make an argument for it really is, I think, a stupid thing for an evolutionist to do, because they're claiming that biological forms jumped outside that law and produced creatures of a fundamentally different sort through numerous generations.
Yeah, what's the specific argument with Shannon? And because all I've heard in the past, Lena, was that they try to say that Shannon's theory can produce non-random information from random noise, and it's just that's the exact opposite.
Let me share this with you. This a quotation from Dr. Werner Gitt, former head of Department of Information Technology at the German Federal Institute of Physics and Technology.
He's my favorite.
So he's one of the world's foremost authorities on information theory. Let's just put it like that. Okay. And he says this about Shannon information. He says, and I quote him, Shannon's definition of information exclusively concerns the statistical properties of sequences of symbols, meaning is completely ignored. It follows that this concept of information is unsuitable for evaluating the information content of meaningful sequences of symbols. A message which has been subject to interference or noise in general comprises more information than an error-free message, according to Shannon theory. It follows that this concept of information is unsuitable for evaluating the information content of meaningful sequences of symbols. Now, that means it can't be the cause of genetic information, because genetic information is meaningful, purposeful, and functional, and prescriptive. Therefore, Shannon information plays no part in any evolution story. And if an evolutionist makes, well, Shannon information, DNA, Shannon information transformed, it's a mechanism for evolution. No, because the sequence arrangement of information in the DNA is specific symbols which have purpose, they have meaning, and they produce function, and they prescribe the functions and features of living things. Shannon information plays no part in the by design of organisms, except possibly in the destruction of its genome through genetic entropy, because you can introduce noise. You might increase information by adding noise to the total amount of information, but that corrupts the information itself. So Shannon information is a mechanism for devolution, not evolution, and it doesn't explain the existence of genetic information.
Yeah, I don't normally like to subscribe to Wikipedia articles, but whoever wrote this in the Wikipedia version of Shannon information entropy did a really good job, and I want to quote it real quick. It says the entropy was originally created by Shannon as part of his theory of communication, in which a data communication system is composed of three elements: a source of data, a communication channel, and a receiver, like we were talking about earlier. In Shannon's theory, the quote fundamental problem of communication as expressed by Shannon is for the receiver to be able to identify what data was generated by the source based on the signal it receives through the channel. Shannon considered various ways to encode, compress, and transmit messages from a data source, and proved in his famous source coding theorem that the entropy represents an absolute mathematical limit on how well data from the source can be losslessly compressed into a perfectly noiseless channel. Shannon strengthened this result considered for noisy channels in his noisy channel coding theorem. So it's the exact opposite of trying to justify non-random information from random noise. It's the exact opposite. They're trying to preserve non-random info. Or I keep saying non-random just to make a distinction between what the evolutionists want to claim DNA is, but because information can never be random. Once information is randomized, it's no longer information. But Shannon information is trying to keep information from becoming noise. And there's all kinds, and just to quantify how to prevent it from being destroyed.
Yeah, and genetic information is not Shannon information. It's functional, prescriptive, meaningful, and purposeful information.
Right.
And Shannon information is not.
Well, again, quote unquote Shannon information is strictly trying to prevent pre-codified engineered information code streams into noise. The exact opposite of what I've heard evolutionists try to claim.
Mm-hmm. And that doesn't describe genetic information either.
Right. Well, again, because all the RNA transfer processes are relaying pre-codified information.
Yeah.
For
noise.
For specific proteins and amino acids. It's even got designed autocorrection mechanisms built into it, like you guys described. It's impossibly non-random.
Right. And noise is not meaningful, functional, or prescriptive.
Right. It just breaks. It's like an old school TV channel off the air, you know, that noise.
Yeah. Nothing meaningful there.
That's literally what evolution claims. Evolution claims that you take a static TV channel and it turned into a I Love Lucy episode randomly. It's impossible.
You guys have heard about the $10 million challenge, the Evolution 2.0 that they at Harvard or Oxford, where they're offering $10 million. Just one quote from Perry Marshall. It's like, a germ-resisting antibiotics do more programming in 12 minutes than a team of Google engineers can do in 12 days. He said one blade of grass is 10,000 years ahead of any computer. If a single firm in Silicon Valley held a fraction of the secrets of the natural code inside of a single cell that set the NASDAQ on fire, organisms self-edit and reprogram in real time in a way that dwarfs anything man-made. If we crack this, it will literally change the course of aging, disease, AI, and humanity.
Yep,
wow,
that's
awesome. Bravo. I didn't know that. Great quote, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good one.
Yeah, and we see that by the histone structure. That's archived data.
Perry Marshall is a Christian. He wouldn't be considered an Orthodox Christian, but he did some other stuff on the topic of miracles that I also found very interesting. That's just total aside. Mm-hmm. Very open-minded guy. He wouldn't be classified as a creationist, but I think his stuff is very interesting. I also I got briefly acquainted with David Abel, who was involved in the first Origin of Life prize, which was only $1 million, which is a lot of money at the time when it was put forward, and it was going to be judged by a lot of Nobel Prize winners in chemistry, and no one's doing it.
I've got quotations by Abel.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I've shared some of that in my debates. He publishes or has published a few papers about the fact that DNA is prescriptive and functional information, and that the ribosome operates as an instantation of an algorithm. Is that the same Abel? It must be the same Abel.
I'm sorry for the background noise here. We have all these guys just tearing up the road with their hot rods. The David Abel actually co-authored the paper Chance and Necessity do not explain the origin of life. Amazingly, his co-author Jack Travers is an atheist. He's an atheist, and I found that very compelling because
I didn't
for someone
know
to
Travers.
be an atheist and still write that paper, I said this guy has a lot of integrity as far as the pure science of it.
Yeah, I would say so.
Not spinning it, and there was an interview. I don't know if it's still available on the net. He said, "Yeah, I thought about this. I'm an atheist, but I wanted to really examine the question." And it was a powerful paper. Unfortunately, there are not going to be a lot of papers like that. They got really lucky that someone would publish it, because what journals want is they want to have authors saying, "Oh, we're figuring this out." No matter how misleading or maybe even dishonest it is, we'll take it because that's what people want to read. They don't want to hear that. I mean, as a scientist, you want to be told that you can figure it out or they're getting closer. I mean, that's just the way they're wired. Nothing inherently wrong about that. What is really tough is to say, you're never going to figure it out.
Wow. I didn't know that Trevor's was.
They don't want to hear that.
I didn't know that Trevor's was an atheist. I didn't realize that those two guys had different worldviews when they published these papers together.
Which I think is great. What that tells me is this stuff is so blatantly obvious that even an atheist is being brutally honest with
even
himself.
A caveman could do it.
And the other thing is, even though Eugene Koonin is one of the top evolutionary biologists on the planet, he weighed in on the origin of life question. And he said, well, he gave this proof, and I talked to Dr. Garrett about this. And I said, Ron, don't you see, even one of your guys on your side is saying you need multiple universes to explain life. He did this calculation that Koonin did, and it was pretty generous, bunch of parameters. I said, yeah, you know, when a respected scientist is appealing to multiple universes you can't see, you can't prove, you can't test, how is that much different than the creationists? Because you can't run this experiment in the lab. You'll never prove it. It's a pure faith statement, except that, you know, I think certain faith claims are more rational than others. And if one believes in multiple universes, it's like, well, what universe are we in? How do you know we're not in the universe where the creationists are right? I mean, it just leads to
well, I debate with that stuff all the time, Sal, you know, just as a astrophysicist type thing, space guy. I like how Einstein describes it. He shows how his relativity physics proved that the universe is a created finite, you know, there's calculable beginning and endpoints, which again, you know, people like Hugh Ross and others, they talk about how they became Christians because the Bible is the only quote unquote religious text in the world that compares with known science. And I love quoting Robert Jastrow. He was the founding director for NASA's Goddard Space Science Studies. If you guys are familiar with him.
Who?
Robert Jastrow. He was
not familiar.
He claimed to be agnostic, but I don't think he really was. But and not to appeal to his authority necessarily, but he wrote a whole book on this topic. And one of my favorite quotes in the line is called "God and the Astronomers." He said, "Now we see that the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. The details differ, but the essential elements in the astronomical and biblical accounts of Genesis are the same. The chain of events leading to man commenced suddenly and sharply at a definite moment of time in a flash of light and energy." And of course, Arno Panzea, of course, he's famous of all. He's the guy that won the Nobel for the discovery of the cosmic background radiation. And, you know, so a lot of the theories of evolution and all stuff come from that. He was a Jewish guy, and he flat said at his Nobel committee that all it did was prove the Bible to him. He goes in detail.
One of the papers published by Abel and Trevor states this: no matter how many bits of possible combinations it has, there is no reason at all to call it information if it does not at least have the potential of producing something useful. What kind of information produces function? In computer science, we call it a program. Another name for computer software is an algorithm. No man-made program comes close to the technical brilliance of even mycoplasmal genetic algorithms. Mycoplasmas are the simplest form known organism with the smallest known genome to date. How is its genome and other living organisms' genomes programmed? So, and I have many other quotes by them. In fact, I've got some slides by them, statements by them about algorithms of DNA. that I'll be using in debate. I've already used some of these in debates. I find it remarkable that Trevor's would do this. It truly is. Being an atheist, essentially, these papers are saying life is produced by intelligence because the properties of them come only from intelligence, is what they're alluding to. And so for Trevor's to co-author these papers is just remarkable. It's almost in mission that evolution can't be true.
You're asked a question in chat, Sal.
Oh, Erica in Speed of Sound's after show accused you just now purposely redefining fitness for your own pleasure. No, a submarine is fit to go undersea. An airplane is fit to fly. A car is, it's fit to operate on land. This is Salvador's definition. This
How
is
can
like
anything that's randomly formed have a fitness?
So fitness, what has happened is evolutionary biologists have redefined the notion of fitness and actually messed it up. The idea of something being fit, if you read Darwin's Origin of Species, he was very much in line with half and half with the engineering definition. So it's not me redefining it. I mean, does a screw fit into a nut? Yes. Right? Does that's like an ion going through a potassium ion channel? It fits within fractional angstroms, fractional sizes of an atom. So the idea of things fitting together or being appropriate to operate in an environment probably predates the silly idea of reproductive success. And the evolutionary biologists have silly definitions of fitness. It's just based on reproductive output, which proves zero. Total.
It sounds like you're saying that the evolutionists are trying to use the term fitness to basically designate design.
Can Speed of Sound, can Standing for Truth share my screen? And let's, if he's available.
He's probably not around. He's probably doing things.
I think he's listening.
I overheard. Because I'm listening from my phone. So if you guys ever do want the screen shared, let me know and I'll run downstairs real quick. So,
this is for Erica.
Yeah, so it looks like Erica was trying to accuse you, Sal, of redefining fitness. But it also makes me wonder if she even pays attention to the arguments that you're putting forth, that we're putting forth. So take your time, destroy that claim. I love it.
Okay, I'm going to read from the paper. I don't know if she saw it, but am I shared?
Yes.
Yes.
It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it. That's the thing. It could well be the best thing for the human race to get dumber and dumber until we lose our minds entirely. I mean, that may end up being the most reproductive, successful thing, right? But so be it.
Well, it explains atheism or evolutionism.
Okay, so we were talking about Speed of Sound's channel. That's where the evolutionary definition of fitness leads you, and you got it straight from the host of that channel. So I had pointed out in my peer-reviewed publication for a quasi-ID friendly one some facts. One, am I redefining it for my own pleasure? The first problem is someone like Lewontin, who's like one of the pioneers of fitness theory, said it's not exactly clear what fitness is. So why accuse me of redefining it? Even evolutionary biologists can't define it very well themselves. They don't know what it is. Alan Orr said there are a staggering number of definitions of fitness. Well, it's kind of hard to redefine something that is so loose. And Andreas Wagner also said it's not entirely clear what fitness is. The problem is, the root of it is the fact that evolutionary biologists can't get their story straight either. So to be saying, well, again, I'm getting this secondhand that Erica is accusing me of redefining it for my own pleasure. The problem is evolutionary biologists can't even get their act together and define it accurately. It's just garbage. But they pretend they have something sophisticated in order to give the appearance that they've solved the problem. And that was like stuff with Fisher's theorem. They have all this mathematics, which is just pure theatrics that have nothing to do with reality. And amazingly, Speed of Sound actually comprehended it better than most of the evolutionary biologists. Granted, I don't agree with his conclusion that this is the best thing for the human race, but he is actually accurate in suggesting that reproductive fitness, the way it's defined in evolutionary biology, will actually lead to degeneration in IQ. So I take exception to that. As much as I like Erica, now you're saying I'm doing some redefining for my own pleasure. What I was trying to point out is fitness in evolutionary biology is a total disaster. It would be an embarrassment. Physicists would not want to do physics by defining their major quantities that way. There are four, by the way, in physics that are baseline. We have length, right? Length is really important, well defined in physics. You can define it. We have the National Institute's Standard to help us define and measure length. Next is charge. Next is time. Time can be measured in seconds, and there's a National Institute's standards that do this. We don't have any such standards for evolutionary biology, where sickness, like Tay-Sachs disease, can sometimes be called beneficial. Loss of organs, loss of limbs. How is this anywhere sensible to be defining things like that? I mean, with someone with the sickle cell trait, the doctor came up to them and said, "Oh, sir, you have a beneficial trait. You have the sickle cell anemia trait," or tell that to a Tay-Sachs disease. And there's this book, Survival of the Sickest, where they had such an absence of beneficial mutations that were complexity increased. There's so few of them that they had to appeal for complexity loss as beneficial mutations. So they came out with the book, Survival of the Sickest, Why We Need Disease. Mm-hmm. So if anyone really has been redefining fitness and actually misdefining it and not doing an adequate job of defining it at all, it's been the evolutionary biologists. It's not been me. So sorry, now you got me riled up.
I'm curious. Here.
Go, Sal.
I'm curious. Can biological evolution, does it essentially say that God designed life to try to automatically be as fit as it can for the environment that it's in as possible? It's designed to adapt to be fit.
Say again.
Are they proving God exists by showing that life is designed to be able to fit in its environment in the fittest way it can, the healthiest way? If the environment changes, then life is designed to fit into it better.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
Darn it. It's making sense in my head. They're saying that life is changing. They want to presume it's random, but I'm adding in the fact that it's designed to change to be able to fit in an environment better.
The adaptation, the ability of organisms to adapt and remain fit in changing environments is evidence of intelligent design, is what our friend is saying. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Their evolutionists are actually proving that intelligent design is in life because life tries to fit in its environment. It's not random. It's not the stuff dying off and the best stuff living. It's the living stuff is living stuff changes while it's alive,
A beautiful example of that is the Italian wall lizards, which turned off the genes to express cecal valves, acid pumps in their stomach because of a dietary change. When they were loosed on an island in the Mediterranean, they had to adapt by eating a plant diet because the insect life was not in great abundance there that they had been accustomed to finding and eating on the mainland of Italy. So what they did was they adapted by eating they turned on the genes that produced cecal valves because additional acid was required to eat the plant material. It's harder to digest than the insects they were accustomed to eating. So they adapted by turning on the genes that produce cecal valves, and so cecal valves appeared in their stomachs. They already had the information to produce the cecal valves in their genome because they had turned them off in the mainland where they were existing because they had adapted to an animal diet. They were eating grubworms and crickets and other things, so they didn't require as much acid to digest them as they would when eating plants. Then they're loosed on the island in the Mediterranean. There's not much animal life for them to eat, so they have to resort to eating plants. Now they need the extra acid in their stomachs to digest the plants, so they turn back on the genes that produce the cecal valves, and the cecal valves reappear. But no new genetic information was produced. They already had the genes that produced it, but they adapted by turning on or off genes that produced an entire structure in their stomach. That's incredible adaptation. Not a development of a new feature because the information was already in their genome to make it. They adapted by turning off or turning on existing genetic information that affected their structural design. Incredible, ingenious design.
It reminds me of something Rob Carter was talking about the other week or two ago about how there's different code in the human liver, for example, liver cells. They'll turn on, turn off to acclimate to certain poisons, and then once the poison's eradicated, it turns that precodified gene function off as needed.
I imagine there's millions of examples like that in the human body.
And I wonder if a bodybuilder, for example, if he's adapting, if that's what the evolutionists want to assume is random. You're building body mass and whatnot. I was thinking how humans will acclimate to weather. You go live in Antarctica for a while. You get used to the cold and you move back to the equator.
That's right. In fact, somebody who lives in a hot environment moves to a cold one, their body responds by thinning their blood. They move from a cold environment to a hot one, their body responds by thickening the blood, allowing less water into the bloodstream or adding more. And that's an adaptation.
Is that what they mean by fitness, biological fitness? That's what I was trying to correlate in my mind. Is just they're proving that life is designed because it tries to fit its environment, and the better that an organism fits in its environment, I guess the better fitness, quote unquote, it has. Right? Is that what they're saying?
Right. The fitness would have to be produced by random change to genetic information. The mutations would have to create those abilities, and we don't have evidence of that.
Right, and that's a false assumption.
The definition of fitness in evolution is like Jell-O. It's a total mess. I'm not supposed to have pointed this out.
I like Jell-O though.
It's. I mean, I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, let's be silly. So they're trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. Is what sounds like you're saying.
So I have some quotes from. This one's funny. Let me see if I could find it. This one was from. Let me see if Brady. Ronald Brady.
Hello.
Ronald Brady pointed out that the evolutionary definition of fitness, it's like using. There's this German proverb. It says, if a bird is sitting on a dung pile, it's going to rain or it's not going to rain. Now, that can't possibly be falsified because it could rain or not rain. And he's not the first to have pointed out that's how amorphous and useless it is. So the evolutionary definition of fitness is like trying to use birds sitting on dung piles to determine truth about reality. It's just, you know,
It's nonsensical.
yeah, it's nonsensical because it's nonsensical what he said. It's nonsensical to the extent that you're trying to use that definition to explain complexity. Natural selection, as put forward with Darwin, was put forward to explain the emergence of the appearance of design, how things are adapted.
Mm-hmm.
And not just adapted, but yes, it is adapted, but really he was trying to explain the extreme perfection, organs of extreme perfection and organs of extreme perfection and complication. I think there was a chapter there, organs of extreme perfection and complication. And well, we use the word complexity, he uses the word complication. And he was saying at first it seems that my theory can't explain this. Well, if you use the evolutionary definition of fitness, which is purely reproductive success, with no correlation whatsoever to increasing complexity, or in Darwin's word, perfection and complication, especially complication, it falls apart as a definition. That's why
Has no explanatory power.
It has no explanatory power except you make more kids. And I just gave an example here where reproductive fitness is showing that there is concern in modern industrialized nations that very intelligent women will have less kids. That's an example where it's just, well, this is actually the anti-complexity. How does that fit in? So again, it's like the bird sitting on a dung pile. It could get more complex or less complex. What was very important, though, is when they began to admit that there's a possibility it could go the other way. Darwin had been saying, in general, for most of what he said, he gave a few exceptions, that natural selection is just keeping, he insinuated, he didn't say it explicitly, is building more and more complexity. He insinuated that. And Richard Dawkins came along in his blind watchmaker argument and started using his weasel algorithm to say, you know, this is illustrating accumulation, cumulative selection. And it's like, well, that's all well and fine, but are what you're accumulating increases in complexity, or are you accumulating damage? Are you accumulating damage? That's a fair question. When they started to concede the possibility that natural selection will accumulate damage, that just is starting, that's like opening the floodgates. The balloon is about to pop now because now the question is open. And what Michael Behe established, just by surveying experimental literature, the overwhelming majority of selected mutations, selectively favorable mutations, they use the word beneficial, which is kind of unfortunate. The proper term is selectively favored mutations are damaging. They're loss of function. They're compromise. And we could see that in numerous ways, such as in bacteria, the fact like E. coli, only 20% of E. coli is conserved. That means 80% of it can dump its genes and still survive. And we see a lot of bacteria dumping genes. So this suggests that there's not a lot of selection pressure to acquire new genes, either through plasmid exchange or whatever. So when they made that concession that there's not an inevitable net drive to acquire complexity, that broke it open. And one thing that we found out, to their horror, is that the evolutionary definition of fitness has nothing to say about it. They can't define it. It's just circular, or maybe not even that. So, what happened with Lewontin, he was studying selection-dependent fitness, density-dependent selection, density-dependent fitness. And what he was disturbed by is you could just change the environment and the fitness values change, because you just change the density. Like if you have like a little petri dish, or like say a fruit fly experiment, if you change the density of the the fruit flies that have one allele versus another, you just change it. You've actually changed the fitness. He was horrified. And he said, this is really problematic. You could see it in the 4 complications. He had something in the Santa Fe Journal, Winter Bulletin 2003. It's one of the most devastating essays on fitness. And he was just describing all the problems with it. And he quietly just kind of bailed out. I mean, he's still an evolutionist, but he gave up on trying to define fitness. There's also another paper by Grodwall, 2018, that called that pointed out also other problems with fitness. Even if we assume these worthless definitions of fitness, it doesn't necessarily maximize, which is very problematic. So the whole fitness theory has fallen flat on its face on a number of fronts. And last but not least, there's Baster's and Sanford's paper on Fisher's fundamental theorem with mutations, and it just shows that fitness will not is not guaranteed to increase if you include damaging mutations. But Behe, I think, was the one who just really put the nail in the coffin. When selectively favored mutations will actually cause loss of complexity and fixate it. We see that in Lenski's experiment. It looked promising for a while until the experiment kept going. And now we're seeing that selection has created such damage to the genome that a lot of the colonies are in a death spiral. They're not going to be able to recover. So selection doesn't preserve. It actually, in some cases, will ensure damage. And Alan Orr actually cited some examples way back in the 90s, and we see them even more now. So, like I said, I'm not the one who's trying to redefine fitness. The problem is evolutionary biologists have failed to define it in any way that's coherent. So, it's like, well, let's apply some standards here. How good are their definitions to explain the evolution of life? In fact, they're terrible. And that's what R.H. Brady and someone named Macbeth and then Olison. There have been papers on that, not to mention Lewontin, and then now papers by Grodwall. There are plenty of them. It's a worthless definition as far as what evolutionary biology ultimately tries to explain, like what Darwin tried to explain, the origin of complexity. It's a disaster. Whereas I think the engineering idea that certain systems are fit to operate in certain environments and do an exceptional job of it. A bird's navigation system is fit to help it navigate and fly, like in the case of the Arctic tern, from the North Pole to South Pole. When we describe machines in terms of its capabilities, we give specifications in what environments it operates in. That is a description of fitness in the engineering sense. And that's the one that makes sense. We now also have the biophysicist weighing in and talking about the metrics of optimality of how these organisms work. One of them, Biolek, who unfortunately is a diehard natural selectionist, but his physics is really good. He points out, for example, that the eye is optimal to be able to see. Now that may seem like, well, what's this? Well, physicists, one of the first laws and principles of physics was geometric optics. There's optimality in focusing. The eye has these properties across all species that have eyes that obey optimality in terms of geometric optics. And there are other metrics that can be applied, such as like what's the optimal sensitivity an eye can operate in? Well, that would be being able to detect individual photons. Same for the smell. You can detect, noses can smell individual molecules. The sensory organs of sharks can sense electric fields at near the absolute limit possible by physics. We would need to have alternate universes with different physical constants to be able to have electric field sensors as sensitive as sharks. It's just amazing. And this just goes on and on. Marcus Eberlin, who was a physical chemist, he did a lot of spectroscopy. He's famous. He had 200 PhD students under him. And he's an ID advocate in Brazil. shout out to Otangelo there. He pointed out that no chemist in the world can put the spin chemistry, the certain quantum states achieved by the cryptochrome protein inside a bird that can put some of the chemicals in spin states in a particular quantum state. That can't be done by any chemist on the world because the way God designed it is better than what we can do. So we have metrics of fitness that are biophysical notions. Another example is the potassium ion channel. The ions cannot be segregated and sorted the way that they're doing unless the channel has dimensions that are precise to within fractional angstroms, which is fractional lengths of an atom. We can't build stuff that accurate. I mean, that's just close to the limits of physics. So we can define the principle of fitness in the engineering and biophysical sense, which is a lot better than the way it's going for evolutionary biologists. It's a disaster, total disaster.
Well, fitness can mean almost anything to an evolutionist anyway. I mean, you know, they assume if something has fitness, then it had to have evolved. They start with that ground, you know, that belief right there. Fitness is a product of evolution. There can be no other type. Certainly can't be a product of design, according to them, right?
Hey guys, real quick, and I gotta call it a night real quick, but in line with what you've been talking about, random observation I came across earlier today. I think it coincides with the fitness topic. Did y'all know that it is now recognized that all free living bacteria and plants have the capacity to synthesize all of the amino acids, but all more complex, quote unquote, organisms do not. So in the context of genetic entropy, fitness, et cetera, I gotta call it quits tonight, but I love to listen to what you guys think about this. Wouldn't that require, if they can synthesize all of the amino acids internally, wouldn't things that come further down the evolutionary timeline not having that capacity by definition be a deprecation of fitness?
Complexity would be a better word, or capability. I'm trying to avoid the word fitness because it's so equivocated. The more accurate is loss of function. Or
yeah, well, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I use fitness in a loose term, but I mean, I'm specifically referring to function of if the capacity to do this existed prior to and it doesn't exist now, that means by default you lost the capacity. So if the entire fundamental foundation of evolution is an increase in function over time, but per the evolutionary timeline, this came first, I don't understand how that's not an ultimate KO punch to the entire premise of evolutionary theory in and of itself.
I've never used that argument, but hey, but it is an interesting observation. I mean, I did notice it. But there are other.
I guess what I'm asking is why is it,
things about that,
why is it not being used more? Is the question I would raise. Is, I mean, what is more fundamental than amino acids, other than nucleotides? What's more fundamental to every biological system? Period.
I think nitrogen fixation, which is an interesting problem. That how do nitrogens become in the form that's usable by biology? Because you need bacteria to make them. So there have been some interesting prebiotic things. But anyway, I'm just rambling now. It's nice to see you, by the way, John.
No, you too, man. Hey, I've been
a long time.
You come back, man. I I was excited hearing you talk the last couple times. We hadn't seen you in a while. I'm glad you've been able to come back out, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, we got. I came out of hiding because one of our papers is doing very fine. I can't. I'm not going to talk about it though. But
Right. Yeah, well, too bad you couldn't join earlier, John.
5 more in the pipeline, and it's only because I have just some tremendous co-authors. It's not because of me. I'm not that productive. It's very hard for a solo author to get 4 or 5 papers through. But their teams, some of these teams are like 10 people big. I'm just like, one little tiny fraction of these. But it's going to be fun, and I have to try to be a good service to my co-authors. And it won't be any anti-evolution stuff. It's just going to be more in the area of protein science and cancer therapeutics.
Yeah,
Speaking of Twitter, John, you haven't posted in 2 weeks, man.
Say what?
Yeah, I want to see a video from you in like 2 weeks.
Man, I've been busy,
I understand.
Life is the rest of you slackers. Aren't doing anything. I mean, no, I'm just messing with you. No, I'm hoping to get some stuff done this week. I've been working some crazy times in good old Nashville. It's some bad
Cashville.
but no, the in context of all these, I've been listening to a lot of videos while I've been working, so I've actually been able to hear a lot of stuff going on. But yeah, to me, when you really start to get into, and it was interesting hearing you talk about topoisomerase the other night, Sal.
Thanks.
When it's been kind of interesting. I've been watching quite a few lectures from different academic institutions, how we say, and it's been very interesting listening to them talk about some of these different proteins and the fundamental functions that they offer and are, in place to perform. And listening to some of them try to come up with and then concede that there is no way around their requirement. It's pretty interesting, actually.
Yes, I tend to, proteins are a difficult field because there's so many of them, and one can only reasonably hope to have some knowledge of maybe 10 out of at least, let's just say the humans, there maybe say 20,000. I mean, just as a rough figure, there are probably more if we include the alternative splices. But out of all that, someone could reasonably expect to maybe know somewhere between 1 and 10, all the aspects and the complexity. We have people that have been studying topoisomerase for like all their life. And, I only get to do some of the bioinformatics support. I don't, that interprets lab results. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to join a team that actually does lab work. And I'm just kind of I'm more of a data clerk to help them with that. But I found another protein today that I'm doing as part of a paper I'm working on, the transcription factor 3A. It's a zinc finger protein. And the way zinc fingers work, you have, goodness, if Standing for Truth is there, I could actually show a picture if he has. Oh, maybe he has to.
I can share it, Sal. Are you?
I'll show a zinc finger protein. This is just totally cool.
And by the way, folks, while Sal's pulling that up, I forget which one of the lectures he gave over on my channel got into great detail about the zinc fingers one night. So great lectures over on my channel from Sal about that exact topic.
So let me give some of you are familiar. Oh, by the way, people were asking, this is one of the peer-reviewed abstracts. You could see my name just buried there toward the end. I'm the one who actually created that diagram with the post-translational modifications. So that was in the Federation Association of Experimental Biologists, their journal. I've actually, and we extended that paper to creationist version. So anyway, this is the amino acid sequence of the zinc finger 136 protein here. But I'm going to highlight some of the features here. Do you see the regularity there? Isn't that cool? You could see like here, you have this cysteine residues all in one column.
Yeah.
And then you have the H. That creates what they call a zinc finger. And I'm going to call up my, let me see if I have it here. I apologize to our viewers here for being a little slow. I'm just kind of grabbing this as I'm able to find it. These are presentations I gave to faculty and deans some time ago.
Sal, those sequences that you see, those patterns there, does that relate to protein folds?
Yes, very much so.
So essentially what you're showing is we can see evidence of protein fold built right into the amino acid sequence just by looking at the sequence. Isn't that correct?
Sometimes it's not usually blatantly obvious like this one. In this case, it's blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
You can visually see it if you can see. I
right.
mean,
when you said this represented a zinc finger, immediately the idea, oh, we're looking at folds here. These are folds.
I'll show you the fold. I'll show you the fold. So each of these fingers here, you can see each of the rows is almost identical to the other, but not quite. It has this pattern. The most important part of the pattern is that it has a C separated by a couple amino acids, and then somewhere farther down you have the H, and then about 3 amino acids in between. And you can see that.
Look, Sal is not even, he's only partway into explaining what he's talking about. And I'm telling you already, what he's showing you on the screen is utterly amazing. That this, because the sequence of amino acids has a pattern to it that relates to folds, not just the order of them, but a pattern within those sequence is information about folds. Utterly amazing. Go ahead, Sal.
So I just happened to come across the ones that are easily visualizable. Proteins like the topoisomerase protein, which I showed here, unless you're a savant, you won't see the pattern. Because here's another one. Here's a common one, collagen. You'll see beauty products at Walgreens that advertise collagen. Collagen is a real protein. And this is the amino acid sequence of the collagen type 1 alpha paralog. It's 1,464 amino acids. And here's the striking pattern.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's mind-blowing, man. That's amazing right there. That's incredible.
Yeah, how do random point mutations make something like this?
Wow.
I have another really cool
Graduals and bots to dust.
That is the end of evolution right there, Sporty.
See, this is why I like structural biology, because it's like, yeah, you show these pictures, it's like, yeah, how did that evolve randomly? And that's not even the beginning of, okay, so I'm going to show the folds of the zinc finger. So the zinc finger, each finger has, if we do a conceptual 2D diagram of the fold, it would look like this, where you see the, I'll show you a little bit later, okay? So just take that. Now, if we do a 3D diagram, they call this a Richardson ribbon diagram that shows the 3D structures. Like right here's the alpha helix. And these are all these little terms that structural biologists understand. I'm kind of learning it slowly. This is what the fold looks like. So the zinc finger has this fold. So if we took the entire molecule, we would see these little miniature folds within the larger fold. And all the zinc fingers have a fold that approximates this. And so maybe to also visualize it, I'm just going to flip this on the side. You could see each of these zinc fingers here. You have that simplified fold. And I'm going to just, can you see what I'm doing here? I'm showing how the C's here connected the zinc ion, where you could see the C's here and the H's there. C is cysteine, H is histidine. The nice thing about the zinc finger, the zinc ion makes the fold really simple. You could almost, I mean, if you spent a day, you could probably just redraw this from scratch. You can't do that with a lot of folds.
Yeah, I mean, I've known the basis for this for quite a while, but to see it in these illustrations is what blows me away.
Yeah,
because we all understand, if we understand a little bit about proteins, we understand that the folds is built into the sequence. You know, the sequence of how they're arranged, how they're specified in the chain is going to determine the structural outcome of the protein. That's true.
Right.
But to see it illustrated this way just really drives it home. This just makes anybody who sees this and believes evolution ought to be scratching their head. How in the hell can natural processes explain that, man?
Well, why don't I just go on, because I love talking about zinc.
Yes, please.
So
I'm
like
sorry
I said,
for
I
the
only
interruption. I just think it's awesome what you're showing. Please, I had to comment. Please.
Thank you. God bless you, Neff. As I said, I'm a protein guy, but even then, every guy who does proteins can only do, like, say, 3 at a time at most, unless he's just being very superficial. And believe it or not, I'm really giving a very superficial, this is a very superficial introduction to zinc finger proteins. There's an entire book on zinc finger proteins I was reading, and I was just like, yeah, I'm kind of stupid compared to these guys. Oh my goodness. The guys who figured this out are just, it's just stratospheric, because what they had to do, the experiments they had to conduct, the way they're able, just for the reader's benefit, the way they're able to determine the fold is with a variety of techniques. Some of them include what they call X-ray crystallography, because we don't have microscopes strong enough to actually see it. So we have to use kind of indirect techniques, and then computer simulations that kind of do fold estimation, any number of techniques. And so you could see that, just imagine you have all these zinc fingers together in a fold. And so what happens, they call this a classical, just to be specific. There are numerous kinds of zinc fingers. I'm showing the classical one. One of the roles of the zinc finger is to be able to connect to DNA. It's not exclusively DNA. It can connect to other things. But you could see how if we have a protein, like say a transcription factor that has to start to help a gene to express, it needs to go to that very specific area of DNA. How does it do it? Well, it uses zinc fingers, because zinc fingers, I use the word key, it's more like a lock. So for a specific DNA sequence, you have to change, just like when we change a key or a lock, like the tumblers in a lock, you have to change the letters. So to get a zinc finger protein to park on a different part of the DNA of the genome, you change the letters here. Isn't that cool?
That's amazing.
So not only it will have this basic fold, but then it has to have these extra properties so that it can target a specific, it can land on the specific part of the genome. We didn't know exactly how proteins are able to navigate and land on the right region. Zinc fingers solve part of that problem. There are other kinds of folds like the helix turn helix, but the zinc finger is just the coolest. When we try to engineer therapeutics that will target specific areas of the genome to like cut it, like these endonucleases, these are man-made, they'll make man-made zinc fingers. But the funny thing is, you see this one has 13 zinc fingers here. The man-made ones, the best ones, can only do 3. The God-made can go up to 33, 40. We can't even approximate that. It does. Wow. The God-made ones are so much better than the human ones. And then so we have also other kinds of zinc fingers like this. These are non-classical, like the ring finger. They have the gold finger. It's all sorts. It's just really cool. Now, in addition to that, you have this domain here. Now, it doesn't have a pattern that's recognizable to the human eye, but the computers will recognize it across species. It's called the crab domain. And let me see if I have a picture of a crab domain, what the crab domain does. Oh, it's good. So you have this crab domain. So just imagine you have this crab domain here, and you have all these multiple zinc fingers. So you have this crab domain. up here, and it connects to all these other parts, and it makes this huge molecular machine that modifies the chromatin. So you see this here? That's DNA.
Yeah.
And here are the histones and the little histone tails that get modified, and that complex is called chromatin. So the chromatin has, by the way, been determined to be a Turing machine. It's a computer. It's Turing complete. And these things here are readers and erasers and writers. I think this is...
Right. And the histones, they convey information to the machinery of the cell as to what to do and not do. That's right.
Right. So you have these writing. This is probably a writing machine. So it's going to be flipping the bits of these histone tails here. But to do that, it has to put this complex in the right location. How does it do it? It puts a zinc finger protein here. The zinc finger protein here will identify the DNA. And this little crab domain, which is up here, helps it connect to the rest of the complex. And you can see how intricate this is. Isn't that
amazing?
Cool?
That's
so
incredible.
How did the mutation make this?
That's a good question.
It didn't.
It's going to go to the wrong.
I'd like to point out that the crab domain has extreme similarity in different creatures because of necessity. That's common design. Because this thing is meant to attach to the DNA molecule, the design of the DNA molecule is the same in a human as it is in a deer and in a beetle. So therefore, you're going to have that similarity because it's designed to attach to the DNA molecule. Since the DNA molecule's basic design is the same in a deer, a beetle, and a human being, there's necessarily going to be this genetic similarity right there. Isn't that correct, Sal? Wouldn't you agree?
I think so. And there's some theories I have about that. I think this is designed by God to help us understand our own biology. Because it's really nice to have these other creatures. There's stuff with bioinformatics that I can't get into. It's really I got something really good for you here.
Okay.
What do these zinc finger proteins often bind to? They bind to transposable elements and endogenous retroviruses.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, those are pieces of useless information.
When I was in my debate with Dr. Dan, God bless him, I said, Dr. Dan, can I talk about it more? He said, no, I don't see the relevance. I don't want to talk. I'm just like, Dan, okay. So I said to say, I had to say, well, we did agree that we would negotiate the time. And so it's like, that's kind of on me that I kind of gave him time to just kind of cut me off. But I wanted to be good to my word. And I say, okay, I will yield my time because that's what we agreed upon. And I do that. But I could have covered this. I wanted to say, Dan, you are just trashing DNA for endogenous retroviruses and these transposons. I was like, I'm just so close to the good stuff. And I was going to show these diagrams. I said,
That's incredible.
And so
he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear the evidence of design. No, got to quit that. You got to silence that. No, you can't put what. Don't want you to talk about that.
So here's this paper, and this is only the beginning. This is the tip of the iceberg. Endogenous retroviruses function as gene expression regulatory elements during mammalian pre-implantation embryo development. And it's through mechanisms like this. I don't know if it's specifically this one, but we're finding all sorts of cool stuff. And this is not going to stop. It's going to be worse. So I need to take a commercial break, gentlemen. I will be back.
Okay. That's incredible. Amazing complexity. Try explaining that with evolution. It's just nonsense to believe undirected processes produce that. Nonsense.
Give it enough time, though, man. Just
time is the hero of the plot, right? Yeah. Time is actually the enemy, but, they're going to claim it's a mechanism. It's absurd. And I think it demonstrates that even modern day scientists who believe evolution is true are under tremendous pressure from within their own minds to continue to believe evolution, considering what's being and has been discovered about microbiology. You know that there's a war going on in their minds. There has to be. It simply isn't plausible that human beings, scientists, can examine this kind of complexity and not find that it creates a conundrum for their belief that unguided process has produced it. It's just not possible. So there is a war going on in the minds of evolutionist scientists, whether they'll admit it outwardly or not, that life is designed. And I think this is one of the reasons that evolution theory will eventually fail and no longer be taught as science. When? I don't know. That could be a long time from now. But I believe it's on its way out.
Yep. Gentlemen, real quick, I'm going to head on out and just let you know, Nephilim, Ear's been trying to ask you a question for a while.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I haven't been paying
You guys
attention.
have a great night. It was a pleasure as always. I could probably end up talking all night long if I let you guys.
Good to talk to you, Joe.
Take care.
Take care. Tell Mrs. Joe I said hey.
Take care.
Good night.
Joel, God bless, brother. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure as always, gentlemen.
So let me see. What is this question? Who did you say was trying to ask a question?
It's me, Iger Television.
Oh, okay, Iger. Okay.
Yo, so yeah, I was watching some videos yesterday because YouTube brainwashed me. But what do you think about Noah's Ark, the Ron Wyatt found? Like, I was watching some videos and they were pretty convincing.
Okay. I personally don't put stock in what Ron Wyatt has said because he's made some pretty bizarre, outrageous claims. Firstly, his claims that the formation found in Turkey, where Turkish people claim that this formation is the remnant of Noah's Ark, the leftovers of it. I don't find that plausible because it would be the wrong shape. God said, build an ark, and that means a box. And the thing is shaped like a modern boat with a curvature to the front and back. In fact, and so it's not the right shape. It appears to be a geological formation, not the remnants of the ark. I don't believe it's what's left of the ark. So that I think is questionable, but I don't know that we can't prove it. But the thing that kills me about Ron Wyatt's claim is he claims to have seen the Ark of the Covenant underneath Golgotha, and he was not able for some reason to create a photograph of it. For some reason, the camera didn't work or something.
I
He
didn't
took
get
a
that
picture,
part.
but
Yeah.
But, and he says that he could see the blood stain from Jesus on this thing. And I'm just thinking, that the blood of Jesus, he says the blood of Jesus trickled down the cross, seeped through the ground, and landed on the Ark of the Covenant, which is buried underneath the spot where Jesus was crucified. But for some reason, his camera wouldn't make a picture. And I just find that whole thing completely implausible. I think he's a charlatan.
So you think the Ark was a box, like the Sumerian story?
I think that's the implication. Yeah, I think a box, because a box is much more seaworthy than a modern ship designed for an ocean-going vessel with a front that has a keel to it. That has a curvature to the fore and the aft. That's not the most stable kind of vehicle for the oceans. A box with a 6-to-1 ratio is, and that's been verified by experimentation in water with models of the Ark.
So at that point, then you're
And I
saying
think
even like Exhibit is wrong, that he got his dimensions somehow wrong for the Ham's Ark replica in wherever he's at. I forget where he's at.
Well, I think it probably is wrong. I think the Ark was probably a long box, which has been the traditional model of creationists have shown for the Ark of Noah, because it is the most stable kind. The Ark didn't need to go anywhere. It didn't need to sail the seas. It just needed to float. That's all. So it didn't need a rudder. It didn't need a keel. It didn't need any of that. It just needed to be a sturdy box. So they probably are wrong, and I believe the size is wrong, because Noah would have used his own cubit God said to Noah, make it this many cubits by this many cubits by this many cubits. And what is a cubit? A cubit is the measurement from the elbow to the tip of the finger on a human being. So it's likely Noah would have used his own arm as a cubit and then designed the ark based on that. Well, because I believe that human beings were much larger prior to the flood than they are today, and humans have adapted to this damaged environment caused by the flood by getting smaller, so we can more easily adapt to a loss of atmospheric pressure and oxygen content caused by the flood. I believe Noah's cubit would have been longer than any cubit since. So Noah's arm wouldn't, instead of 18 to 22 inches, might have been 26 or 28 inches, because Noah wasn't 6 feet tall, he was 10 feet tall, you know, and or something like that. And if that's true, then the ark would have been longer than the 450 feet that they say it is. It would have been more like 600 feet long.
Right.
And so I think they got the size wrong.
He actually said that on the video I watched yesterday. He said it was bigger because the cubits were bigger. But you don't think? But
Ron Wyatt said that?
That was my question to you about that. Because I was like, isn't that like?
Who said that? Who said that?
In the video I was watching, Ron Wyatt. How
Ron Wyatt said that. Okay, well, he got that much right. Yeah.
Yeah, he said that, you know, most people expect it to be 450 feet, but then, you know, that the cubits were bigger back then. So then this thing's like over 500 feet or something. And I'm going to watch the video again. And then there's like a full documentary that's 2 hours long. I only watched like a shortened version so far. But you know, it's back in the 90s when I was just a little kid. And he takes metal detectors and they take some type of sonar equipment and they find like different things. So I didn't watch the full 2 hour documentary yet, but I watched like a shortened version. And but I don't know, man, it was pretty convincing to me. Like even when I was little, I remember them showing it on the news. There was a clip of Barbara Streisand talking in there, and I was like, man, I remember seeing this when I was a little kid. But you kind of put that in the back burner because you get brainwashed by evolution and Hollywood and Jurassic Park and other things. So yeah, but I was watching just the short version last night, but I'm gonna watch the fuller one today. But I was kind of wondering what your thoughts were on the Ron Wyatt's ark discovery, and you're saying it for you it's like the.
I am skeptical that that's the location of the ark because of the shape of it. And also, and it looks to me like a geological formation, and it doesn't look like the remnants of the ark. On top of that, and here's, I think, possibly the most damning argument, at least it seems to be to me. When the flood ended, Noah and his family remained on the ark for a year. If you read the scriptures, they stayed on the boat for a year until they got out of it. The reason God commanded them to do that was so that plants would spring forth. And when he released the animals from the ark, then there would be food on the ground. There would be plant life, and the animals could graze. So otherwise, they get off the ark, and it's nothing but dirt everywhere, nothing for them to eat. So they remained on the ark, eating the food that Noah had put on the ark for a year. And then that gives 1 full year for plants in the billions upon billions upon billions of seeds that were buried in the sedimentary materials laid down by the flood. Those seeds begin to sprout, and because the waters obeyed, the ground dries out enough, and the sunlight, the plants begin to sprout, and now you have plant life, grass, and there's bushes, there's berries growing everywhere, and so there would be things for the animals to eat. So when Noah gets off the ark, there are no trees on the earth. The only trees that exist are a foot tall, because that's about as tall as they can grow in a year.
Yeah.
You know, so it would take a generation for trees to grow to normal size again on the earth, you know, after the flood. So there was no building material for Noah to build homes out of except mud, dirt. And it's very difficult to build a roof out of mud, brick. What's going to support it? See, very difficult. So it seems to me that Noah and his family and his children, and maybe their children's children, would have scavenged wood from the ark to build homes for themselves immediately after the flood. They would have said, well, we're moving, guys. We're going to go over there, you know, about a mile away. Let's start tearing the ark apart. And they start pulling wood off of it. I don't think that the ark would have remained largely intact if a generation of people are stealing wood from it to build houses. See, so the ark, the alleged formation in Turkey looks like a complete ship that's just been there rotting, if it were a ship, and not scavenged. And on top of that, why would it retain the structural shape around the outside, but then the upper part that was above it, which was a meter long, where's the evidence that that existed? I just think it's the wrong shape, and I think it would have been scavenged. And also, one more thing, there's historians, several historians, including Berosus, the famous Chaldean historian, wrote that people would, after the flood, for generations, people migrated, not migrated, but they went to the ark. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. They went to the ark to get pieces of wood from it to make amulets out of her, so that they could go back to their families and their cities and say, look, I got a piece of the ark. It's around my neck. See, this came from the Ark of Noah. Isn't that amazing? Or entire beams of wood. And people would use it to carve things, you know, and show that was made from the wood of Noah right there. And that would mean further scavenging. People are trying to tear it apart, hack at it with axes to cut pieces of wood off to take away as souvenirs. That would have further destroyed, disassembled the ark. So I just think that Noah was smart enough. You get off the boat, you got nowhere to live. There's no trees on the earth. But we have the ark, and it's already waterproofed.
It's interesting too. There's a lot of cave formations where, you know, it looks like people dug it out and built in their dwellings inside the cave. So to refute your, they needed the wood from the ark to the trees. This would have provided you know, a sturdier home than the ark itself. So there's even like churches that have been built out of the dirt and mud and, you know, just carved out into, which is a beautiful thing actually, because then you wouldn't have to transport any material. You're just kind of
just dragging it a half a mile away or a mile away. You know, he's got the animals that can do that for him. He's got 2 elephants on the ark, you know. I mean, they probably would have been babies, but I mean, you know, between him and his sons, you know, which were big strapping guys. These guys are, you know, bigger than normal human beings are today. You know, they could, you know, transport timber from the ark and use it to build houses. Yeah.
I don't know. I just found it fascinating. They were.
It's all those are my opinions. You have your own, but
I'm going to go a little bit deeper in the subject and maybe debate you a little bit better next time. But
okay.
Yeah, that was my question to you. I was curious to see what your opinion was. I kind of heard Ken Hovind talk about it once, and he just kind of said he believed Ron Wyatt's story because he was friends with him or whatnot. But he didn't like to. He didn't go into specifics about it or not. You know, there's a lot of different things he said, and you can believe whatever you want. But the main point.
I find his statements about the Ark of the Covenant to be unbelievable myself. So
that one I haven't looked into. I just kind of started looking into the Noah's Ark yesterday. So that Ark of the Covenant stuff can be for another. The one thing I can remember is from the History Channel. It was like some island in Canada, and then I don't trust the History Channel one bit nowadays. But I remember like a decade ago when I used to love them and watch them every night. But they were talking about there was this Easter Island, I think it was called, and how they had this. It was some type of tunnel that went so deep, and anytime you try to dig into it, and they were saying that the ark wasn't there. So, but that's completely off topic of what Ron Wyatt said about the Ark of the Covenant. But but I was just throwing that out there. But yeah, the ark, the Noah's Ark thing, I just thought it was fascinating because even like even ABC was talking about it and whatnot. So it was kind of strange, and it was very convincing. Like I said, they were finding like nails. They were finding I don't. They were doing like greater stuff, and then Turkey even acknowledges it as Noah's Ark. There's little signs and whatnot. You could just Google it up, Noah's Ark Turkey, and there's an address there. They have a little gift shop or whatnot right outside of it. So
Yeah, that might have something to do with it.
What do you think, Chris?
I don't know enough about that. I've actually seen a little bit on that, but I wouldn't know enough to make an opinion. Or to be honest, but I have seen some of Ron White's work with the Sodom and Gomorrah, and I think that was a little bit more convincing because you can actually see the rock where it was actually melted, and then he had the sulfur that he ignited, so that was a lot more convincing. But I have no opinion on the other. I haven't investigated it enough to be honest.
Yeah, I've seen that. There may be truth to that. I'm not sure if there do appear to be convoluted strata. There are layers of material, but I'm not so sure that was produced by heat. That looks to me more like, product of the Noahic flood, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's why I said I'm like you, Nev. I'm skeptical on it, especially his work.
I'm highly skeptical of all things. I study and investigate. You're not going to just convince me something is true without me looking into it.
You got that right.
Well, I'm gonna look into it, bro. I just barely scratched the surface last night looking into Ron Wyatt's stories and
do the research for us and report back. Let us know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. But so far, man, it looks pretty. Though he does have some theories going into it. From what I saw, because the ark's a lot lower than it would have been when it rested originally after the flood. So according to his theory, there was a volcanic eruption, and then the lava flow carried the ark down some way, and then so anytime there's like theories involved, then I start to get skeptical. But then when they start when he's brought out the metal detectors and they started mapping out like where they found metal and they were digging up these little nails. And then another thing that's interesting is something called ballast stones, which are used to stabilize a ship. And these things are like 10 feet high, like you say, NephilimFree. And they got these markings on them that look very good.
I've seen that. Yeah.
So those were, like when I saw those kind of like, and those kind of were kind of like very compelling, I should say, because you're in the middle of a desert. What's the point of having ballast stones there?
Yeah, I understand.
So it was kind of interesting, but it was fascinating, and I'll look into some more, and then I'll let you guys carry on with the genetic conversation, which is also fascinating, but it's not my forte.
Thanks, Iger. Yeah, Sal's been very. It's been very nice to listen to. I was talking in the chat. I could listen to it all night long. To be honest with you.
Oh, Sal, what do you think about Noah's Ark in Turkey? Have you ever looked at Ron Wyatt's work or no? You're muted, Sal.
Oh, I'm sorry. By the way, nice to meet you. Have we met before?
I don't think so.
Do you go?
I think this is my first time on this channel.
Hey guys, I'm going to get out of here. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. Thanks for coming in here to talk to me, and being here on this channel to share information and discuss the truth instead of believing lies. I've enjoyed talking to you guys. That's great work, Sal. I love what you're showing about these histone codes and these
finger proteins.
That was very interesting. First time I've ever seen it.
I have a joke for you, Neff.
Okay.
I call it giving evolutionary biologists the finger.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Yeah, good.
Well, you did good tonight, Neff, man. Take care, bro. Get some rest.
Okay, guys. Thanks. Have a good one. Catch you next time. You too.
All right.
Iger, should I call it Iger?
That's what I go by as Iger Television. When I first started this channel, I thought that came from Nothing Explosions and Fish, and then so it's actually an acronym for It's God Even Real. And I'm on Instagram as well. If anybody wants to shoot me a message, I usually respond to those because I don't know how to shoot messages on YouTube, but I'm on YouTube as well. And I try to debunk the Big Bang and evolution every chance I get.
Well, I don't look into the specifics of the ark construction. I also think that there's probably some miracles involved in helping the ark stay together and God protecting it specially. So that's what I think. I don't follow Ron Wyatt's work, and there are a lot of creationists that consider it suspect, some very good creationists. So I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I just don't use it for any purposes when I teach in the church on the topic of creation evolution. I try to be very conservative in what I say in church. So it may sound funny that I try to use material that can be found in secular journals, and I'll deviate from that, obviously, since I'm a creationist every now and then. But it actually makes it harder because to make one's case, because I have to rely on material that's actually from secular journals. And we're slowly we're moving forward in finding things in the secular world that are supportive of Noah's flood, but we're not quite there. Right now, the creationists really are just doing really well in abiogenesis and in the topic of reductive evolution, genetic entropy, devolution, eukaryotic evolution. We're getting some headway into the youth of the fossil record, but we have a ways to go. And there's some advances in cosmology, in seeing that the solar system is created rather than evolved. We've gone really well there. So God is continuing to provide. Because many years ago when I was a new Christian, an atheist confronted me about the ages of the patriarchs, how these people lived 930 years, or in the case of Methuselah, 969 years?
Yeah.
And I didn't have an answer for that for a very long time. But God is revealing it to everyone, how this might be possible if they're willing to hear it, because of the advance of technology. So I see the same thing happening with the topic of Noah's flood. We're going to learn more if as the Lord provides.
And I appreciate using secular work like that, because that knocks out the argument where they always say where you use this using creationist scientist work. So that definitely helps.
Oh yeah, it's moving in the origin of life. We're starting to really just own that argument. It's nice now that I can, when I'm in a debate about whether abiogenesis had to be natural or a miracle, it's really easy now. We can just quote secular literature by very top scientists, including a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Smalley, who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. God rest his soul. He became a Christian before he died. He was an atheist, and it was through the witness of James Tour and an old Earth creationist by the name of Hugh Ross. I'm a young Earth creationist, but God can use all sorts of people in His kingdom, and that's one example. A Nobel Prize winner in chemistry realized that abiogenesis would require a miracle, and it was wonderful. He accepted. Richard Smalley accepted the Lord before he died. Praise God.
Yes, praise God. That's great. It's an awesome story. And there are more. Just talking to Joel, who left off here. He said, in his field, he's found that a lot of the scientists aren't actually atheists, like a lot of evolutionists would lead you to believe. They're different faiths or whatever, but they're not necessarily. They believe in, more prone to believe in intelligent design or creation, special creation, rather than basically the way the theory postulates, just coming about from actually nothing.
Right. Life.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So
I was saying that it becomes harder and harder because we're actually seeing the machines of life, and where we really know it now is when we try to re-engineer the parts. It may have seemed that we figured things out because we were doing so much genetic engineering, but a lot of that early genetic engineering was just taking and transplanting parts. Actually engineering them from scratch is really hard, really hard. And we're finding that out. One of the examples, hard zinc finger, man-made zinc finger proteins are just, they're not as good as the ones that are found that are God-made.
What's the best theory for abiogenesis? Is it like a meteor seeding life, or is it the ocean vents, or was it like a lightning strike? What's the most popular theory nowadays for the atheists on abiogenesis?
There's not one unified answer. It's really funny because one group of atheists will say the other guys are wrong for these reasons, and the other group will say they're wrong for these reasons too. They sort of destroy each other's arguments. It's really fun.
A meteor that got struck by lightning.
Oh yeah, in fact, there've been some really
an ocean vent, and that sprung like RNA into existence, and we all came from RNA.
Well, yeah, you're right. There's several, like we went through it on, I think, Smokey's channel, like 40 something, and some of them are ridiculous. But go ahead, Sal. Sorry.
All of these are very misleading because it's like if I took I don't know. I'm trying to create a way of conceptualizing this. It's like taking a picture. If you took an egg and threw it against the brick wall, but if you took just a still shot of a picture while it's flying and say, hey, this is evidence that this egg can knock down the brick wall. All right, you'd think that's ridiculous, right? Because you know where it's just gonna splatter on the brick wall. But what they do is they'll say, well, look, this is progress. At least the egg is flying, right? And they'll just stop it there. They never go and say, how is this going to end? Because even if we start out with RNAs or these hydrothermal vents, it's not going to become life. The reason we know that is if you take a cell or any approximation thereof and it's dead, like say you poke the cell and you kill it, but or better yet, you take you kind of put it in a hypothetical blender and you put all the contents in a test tube, it's not going to assemble into a functioning cell. And that little experiment has more high quality biological chemicals than any of the origin of life experiments on the planet. Not only are they better than anything, the origin of life experiments on the planet today, probably anyone that we could make. So it's very misleading when they point to these things as significant progress. This is like trying to give a grain of sand when you need a galaxy worth of experiments to prove you right. It's just terrible.
Yeah, it's like I've heard that explained too, or the argument, like not an argument, but explain like, you've got a dead plant, and then you've got everything there you need for life. You know what I mean? But once it's dead, it's the spark of life's gone. It's gone.
We call that.
If I give you a frog and you blend it in a blender, and then I dare you to make any life out of that. So. Yep.
You call it what now?
If I gave you a frog and blended it in a blender, try to make another frog out of that.
Yeah, I heard what you said there. What Sal was saying, they call it what now? Would you say you call it? You're fixing to say something.
Oh, I forgot what I was going to say. I like that frog in the blender. Oh, they call it the asphalt paradox.
Yeah.
It means it's not technically an asphalt. It's a figure of speech that organic chemicals left to themselves, if they're not living, they'll just decay into an asphalt, which is just basically a pile of junk. It's not technically what we consider asphalt, but it's a figure of speech that this is just, It'll be a pile of chemicals that aren't very good. Some of the amino acids will turn into something like tar, and it's just not going to be living, because living things they have a very delicate structure of how they are connected. And in the molecular world, there are all these things that scramble organization, somewhat analogous to a tornado. And it needs a living organism actually has to expend energy so that all this random motion is kind of the negative effects of it are kind of contained, so that a tornado passing through a junkyard will not make a 747, but a 747 can probably actually fly right through a hurricane and maybe even glance a tornado, because it can fly like maybe on the order of 500 miles an hour. So as long as it's not facing too much twist, it can face a lot of wind and not be destroyed. But the point, so living things, in a sense, they can, once they're living, they can resist a lot of perturbing forces. But when they're in the dead state, it's just not going to spontaneously assemble into that kind of organization that we see in life. When Hoyle said the 747, the junkyard in a tornado, it's accurate in the sense that objects have to be shaped properly and then positioned properly. It's just a lot of mechanical things need that, and for that to form spontaneously, it's just unlikely. And origin of life researchers like Steve Benner have finally come out and said this is a serious paradox, because we know all chemical theory points to this. And so what's their recourse? For Benner, he's saying, well, maybe there are laws of physics and chemistry that are yet to be discovered.
Yes, I've heard that.
So, I mean, if one's committed to naturalism and against the idea of miracles, that's the recourse. But the problem is, if these are supposedly laws that we can't replicate in the lab, that they're no longer in operation today, how is that really very different from creationism, where you're appealing to things that you'll never define, you'll never understand, you'll never able to test in the lab?
The unnatural is what they're appealing to.
Yeah, it's basically godless.
Yeah,
a godless
exactly.
miracle. They're
A godless miracle.
The godless. That's what I'll call it from now on. When they appeal to multiverses or new laws of physics, I'll say these are godless miracles.
That's a good. I'll use that too. I'll borrow that.
Godless miracles.
I like that.
I saw you had a paper on geocentric versus heliocentric while you were skimming through to look for another paper. I'm just curious, what's your take on the whole? Are the lights we see up there, are they spinning around us, or are we spinning around them?
We are spinning, and it looks like they're spinning around us. The basic reason. This is very simple. It's based on, oh goodness, I should know that. I'm embarrassing myself here.
Your relative.
I get centripetal acceleration. So you can tell when you're spinning, right? Like if you close your eyes and you spin yourself, and like let's say you're in a chair that is a swivel chair. If someone's spinning you around, you'll feel it.
For sure, yeah.
Right. So when an object is spinning, it generates centripetal acceleration, and it creates things like centrifugal forces, and then also Coriolis effects.
Yeah.
So that when you fire an artillery shell, depending on your location on the Earth and the direction that you're sending the shell, it's gonna go to the right or to the left slightly. So when we build artillery shells, and I actually worked in missile systems, the Australians had to put a Coriolis correction in when they launched their Harpoon missile, and you'd need a Coriolis force correction in missiles launched in the Northern Hemisphere. So the point being is we have instruments that can detect, kind of just like the way you can feel yourself swiveling in a chair, whether we are rotating or not. But they have to be pretty sensitive to be able to do that, because we're not spinning quite fast enough that you'd actually feel it. But if you go to the North Pole versus the equator, there's a slight change in gravitational acceleration that could be measured. And then we can also do the Coriolis effects. And through this, we are able to independently confirm that the Earth is rotating at a certain speed. So the reason I pointed out geocentrism, it had nothing to do with actual geocentrism. It had more to do with, evolutionists will say, well, why does everything look evolved if it's created? And to which they'll say, well, God's being deceptive. to which I respond, it's like, well, then is God being deceptive because it looked like the stars are orbiting us, or that the sun is rising and setting every day? It's like, absolutely not. He gave us enough information that we could reconstruct that that the world isn't geocentric, that the solar system is heliocentric, and then there's some other things even beyond that. So God is not deceiving us if we're willing to open our eyes. What we do see is a pattern of creatures that we can kind of arrange into classifications of creatures like mammals and vertebrates, and then we have like bacteria, into what they call kind of a nested hierarchy. But it doesn't mean that it's evolved. There's a different organizing principle, which I call the stairway to understanding, that all these creatures are laid out from simple to complex. It's actually very nicely optimized to help us do scientific research. Because I'll just give you a simple example. It's really great that we're able to dissect fetal pigs,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to understand our own biology, because otherwise we'd have to be volunteering each other for dissections.
Right.
And if you've seen the cruel experiments done at laboratories to do all sorts of cancer research or brain research that we do on mice, you would be so grateful that a mouse has so many similarities to us. Same for chimpanzees. And for a while I didn't, I thought, maybe that's kind of a weak argument, but I can tell you, when I was near these labs and hearing these experiments, I began to thank God every day that we were similar to chimpanzees, because I would not want to subject any human being to this. And where it really came to the forefront was I had to do a student report on one particular nerve receptor, and the graduate teaching assistant that was assigned to me, I would interact with, and he would help me. And I said, where did these cells come from? And he said, yeah, these are embryonic stem cells. And I looked up where these stem cells came from. They came from an aborted fetus. And I was just like crushed. I said, Lord, we don't have to use human babies to be able to do this research. We could use chimpanzees or mice. You've provided a means of escape so that we don't have to die. Another innocent creature can die in our place, which echoes a lot of things in the Old Testament where we had animal sacrifices. So when evolutionists say, well, why did God make a monkey? Because that makes some people think that there's evolution. I said, you ought to be glad God made a monkey, because otherwise it'd be you and your family that'd be volunteered for these experiments.
Exactly.
Just like Jesus Christ died for our sins as our substitute, these innocent creatures die in our place so that we can understand we're fearfully and wonderfully made in the image of God.
Here. Well put. Well put. Very well put. And that makes a lot of sense.
So that's the geocentrism. That's where it began.
Well, for me, I'm a geocentric now, and I became one about 3 years ago, and that's what kind of woke me up to evolution being a lie, the Big Bang being a lie, and but everybody has a different way to go about things, and I respect all your knowledge on the genetics and all that. So,
well, I'm glad I could help you. I am a young Earth creationist. I'm just not a geocentrist.
That's cool.
But thank you. Pleasure meeting you, sir.
Huh? Do you have a link to a YouTube channel? I'd love to subscribe. Do you put any videos?
I'm going to be trying to build one soon because I'm trying to work, God willing, with Dr. Change Tan at University of Missouri. She is a young Earth creationist. How did she end up becoming a university professor at a secular college? Well,
so you don't have
that by being an atheist first, and then you become a Christian afterward.
I became a geocentrist, and it took me about a year because I had to get 2 telescopes and look at the stars and see that everything NASA produces is basically just government propaganda, just like all the other government space agencies like NASA, RAXA, JAXA, and so on and so forth. And once I realized that they were lying about that, then it was easy to see. All I did was watch Ken Haven's Creation Seminar 1, and then I understood why they wanted to shut him up, why there was so much controversy around him, and it's because he's speaking in the truth, and then that's why that's how these government agencies work. They got we pay them all this money, all the taxpayers pay them all this money to just give us all this fake propaganda and fake science, and basically they give you cartoons and you take it as fact. But even when you're looking into like little tiny things like what you like to talk about, you got these electron microscopes, and they have you have to put things in vacuum chambers, and then once you put something in a vacuum chamber, it absorbs all the water. It kind of just sucks it all out or whatever. And so they have to coat them with metal. So at the end of the day, when what you're looking at, it, who knows what you're looking at, you end up with a cartoon. So same thing happens with the heliocentric model. Anytime they discover a planet, or they tell you they discover a galaxy, or they tell you you're here in the Milky Way galaxy, and they show you a cartoon, and we accept it as fact because they got to teach you this when you're a kid. And if you were a grown man and they tell you you're spinning 1,000 miles per hour and you don't feel it, and the sun's going around the Earth is going around the sun at 66,600 miles per hour, but you don't feel anything, at one point or another, then it all becomes just the synagogue of Satan. Jesus calls them in the Bible, Illuminati nowadays, or whatever other names you want to give them. They have a lot, but they infiltrated the government, the education system, the media especially. Because through 6 corporations, they control all the media, and then we're getting fed all these propaganda ever since we're kids to believe that we're insignificant, that God is fake, and that we come from fish and nothing explosions. And all right, I'll stop. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, like the good thing is that that is what led you to be woke, to come to the realization that to question evolution, which is good, and that, but
I know this is not the focus of this channel, and
right,
and I like a lot because that's all you guys talk about on this channel. Help make my arguments better for when I talk to atheists. They they start bringing up all these different arguments when you talk about abiogenesis and things like that. And watching people like Standing for Truth and NephilimFree, and they woke me up to a lot of good arguments against it.
Well, the great thing about SFT's channel is like what Sal was saying. They use a lot of the secular sources against their own words, their own published papers, and using them really to prove that evolution is false by their own words. So that's great. But I'd like to thank you, Sal, for taking your time. I'm fixing to head off, and Standing for Truth for having me.
Have you met Chris?
Not personally. I mean, on air like this.
Are you a pastor? Are you a?
Chris is awesome.
I thought maybe I.
No, I'm not. I'm not a pastor at all. Or no, I just I'm a young Earth creationist. I do not believe in evolution because I don't see the evidence. I've been following Neph for a long time, but I was fooled into believing evolution through school system, and it never made sense to me. Fortunately. It's very easy once you start digging it underneath the surface. You'll start seeing the holes in the theory, and so when I look in the fossil record, I see extinction and stasis. We look at we have fossilized insects that are supposedly 60 million years old, identical to exactly what we have now. I just don't see. I don't see the like Darwin said, gradualism, point mutations. We should see the fossil evidence and the change, and we don't. And then they postulate things like punctuated equilibrium, which allows for explosion. I think Cornelius Hunter put it best. He's got a little quote of there's no bad news for evolution. It's a short little excerpt that he wrote that puts it best. But I can't quote it, of course, from here. But if you look it up, Dr. Cornelius Hunter. It's got a good.
He's a great guy.
Yeah, if you looked at his work,
biophysicist. I love biophysicists.
Yeah, he's got a blog. I think Darwin's got. What is it?
That's a great.
Yeah,
I got some of my material from that. So
yeah, he's definitely somebody I've followed for years too. That's uses the same thing. Uses their own work against them. Yeah. So that's what channels I love. That's what gravitated me towards Standing for Truth's channels, is that they're taking their own research and here's what they say, and they're not agreeing with each other, but they want you to lead you to believe that they've got it all figured out. Well, not lead you to believe. That's what a lot of the proponents will lead you to believe. but most of the scientists are just doing their work in their little field, and they're putting out their work, and then a lot of people are making conclusions from it, and speaking for them, I think, in a lot of ways, because I don't believe that they're all atheists like they'll make you or lead you to believe. A lot of them will. So,
Yeah.
but I do want to appreciate you for your time.
Thank you.
And it's
And,
very
I
nice to
probably will be
meet you.
signing off.
I hope. Okay, I see that. Maybe saw you talking. Maybe Standing for Truth might be helping you get a channel going. If once you get a YouTube channel, it'd be great. I would love to maybe subscribe.
Yes, we're gonna try to get it stood up. It's going to be not just creation evolution, but apologetics, evidence and reasons. So when I teach evidence and reasons, I have a small private Bible study that kind of inspired the idea. We have about it's evidence and reasons for the Christian faith. About 60% is the creation evolution controversy. Maybe 10% is on archaeology, 10% on personal testimonies, and the remainder is what they call presuppositional or the other kinds of apologetics. So, archaeology and creationism being 70% of what we teach, that'd be considered evidential approaches to the Christian faith. It's not meant to convert atheists. It's meant to help Christians that are wanting to be reassured that there's a God.
Yes,
and
that
that
is
the Bible
great.
that they have is can be trusted. And so a lot of churches feel uncomfortable with this approach because understandably they just want to teach right out of the Bible, which is
Right.
God bless them for that. Whereas the approach of going into the creation, evolution, controversy, and archaeology, it's actually stuff, strictly speaking, if we talk about the science and archaeology, that's outside of the Bible. They feel uncomfortable with that. And I totally get that. But I know that there are a lot of people that either got converted by the study of this or were on the fence, and it really just bolstered their faith when they saw, that studying the works of God that aren't specifically in the Bible. It mentions it kind of in passing in the Bible, like, God created things. But when you actually study it in the science, it helps people's faith. So I felt led to start building this. And then we will have I'm committed to having at least maybe 2 episodes on molecular biology. And if it goes well, we'll do the whole semester worth of Dr. Change Tan's molecular biology course at University of Missouri, which will be really cool because then it might well be that the creationists have one of the best molecular biology courses available on the internet.
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah. And you know why? It's the best way to teach the biological aspects of creationism.
It is, yeah, for
Because
sure.
I asked her, I said, how did you start studying this? She said, well, I had to teach it because she was a synthetic organic chemist, which is really smart. And then she was a Harvard postdoc, so she's just brilliant. And she got assigned to teach biology, so she had to actually learn biology from being a chemist, although that's a really good background to have because biology is just full of chemistry. And she became a cell biologist, and she was teaching it, and she's looking at everything she had to teach. She said, well, I have to teach that it evolved. But as she actually studied the organisms, she said, I don't see how it can evolve. So that's how it began. And then, so she became committed then to teaching the architecture of biology, because if you actually see how things are made, you can have a better understanding why it can't evolve. So she's able to get away with teaching kind of creationism by actually just teaching just the way biology is from a chemical standpoint. Don't have to mention God, don't have to mention intelligent design. You just have to describe the complexity, and the facts speak for themselves. And so the molecular biology course would be one that would be acceptable at any secular university.
Yeah, it really is common sense because the chicken and egg conundrums, they're from the very start on the, the molecular, the chemical level. They're all the way up to the macro level that we see today, just with birds and the bees and the flowers. Everything is dependent on something else. and if you remove those parts, it all falls apart.
And you know, it's really funny. I got to tell you, it's funny. Whenever she wants to introduce something that's critical of evolution, God's provided because it's in peer-reviewed literature. So, like I mentioned, the asphalt paradox.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, why can't you teach this? You know, how could any university administrator say, well, you're not allowed to cite secular peer-reviewed material in your class? They're not going to say that.
Right. That's what's best to, use secular sources like that because, yeah exactly.
Yeah, because the Lord has provided. Maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, this wasn't available, but now it's becoming too evident. People have to acknowledge it. I mean, just if they can, they probably can't live with themselves if they don't admit the truth at some point. And
I can remember even like when Neff started his channel, like 10, 12 years ago, the atheists had the market cornered pretty much on the internet, because there were very few apologists on here that were able to come on here like SFT and refute some of this science, and they would easily just say you just don't understand the theory. Now they can't say that, and they're using the same tire arguments. They're still using sickle cell anemia. They're still, you know what I mean? It's like they have nothing better, and it's just great, as it's to watch it fall apart. And I've watched it over the years, and it's you like a lot of people say if you wait a couple of years, just if something comes out and it's the next thing they're touting. Just wait a couple of years, and there'll be an explanation for it from the creationist side. There always is. So.
Yeah, the Lord is providing. There's more evidence now for the Bible and the Christian faith than at any other time since the age of the apostles. So probably it seems like when Christendom really needed God to witness and encourage their faith, the Lord has been providing, and I totally see that. And I have to, this is difficult to admit, but I think if I had lived 100 years ago, I don't know that I would have been a Christian then, because we don't have what we have now 100 years ago. And it would have been easy for me to have been pulled away because I have a very skeptical mind. I probably have a personality that's very akin to the atheists who always being and asking. And I think I probably, I just thank God that I'm born in this era.
Yeah, me too, with the internet too, because they do a good job of selling the theory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they make you, they make you believe that it's just like it's a fact, and then you start digging into it, and it's like, wait a second, what about this? And you take a process, something like metamorphosis, and you're like, that's there's no way, it's impossible. You know what I mean? If you start trying to back it up, rewind the tape, what good is a half of a chrysalis or cocoon, you know what I mean, until that insect can go in there and dissolve itself into a completely new species. And it's just like, it's just, from every step that you look at, it's complexity, and it's mind-blowing, and it just shows, it just testifies of God's creation.
Amen.
So, but there's one thing I do like, and I'm going to get into, because I'm not very, I'll let you guys handle, you guys are more into this, because, I'm unfortunately not as gifted in this line of apologetics, but I like to get into some typology. I don't know if you've ever studied in typology of Jesus in the Old Testament.
Oh, not at all. I'm not familiar at all with it.
Well, maybe we won't go into tonight, but sometime maybe when you have time, I'll go into. I'll point you to a good channel. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mike Winger, but he's got an excellent series called Jesus in the Old Testament, and it's a 24-part series, and it's great because it's just, the Bible is it's one story that's cohesive, and that's something like you were talking about, that will strengthen your faith, help somebody else strengthen their faith, that's, more for a believer, you know what I mean? So, but I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take too much more of it.
Yeah.
But
well, thank you. Someone asked me to join the chat, but I don't type that fast. Faithful, honest, and true. He said, can you post the join link? No, I'm not the moderator. You have to ask SFT.
Yeah, SFT posted it. But I'm going to sign out. I'm a
right,
caregiver
God
for my
bless you,
grandfather. I got to be up early, so I thank you,
God
Iger.
bless
Good
you,
to see you as
Christy.
always.
Take
Stand
care.
for truth. Thank you for having me, and very nice to meet you, Sal.
Very nice meeting you too,
All
Chris.
right, brother Chris.
And take care, everybody in chat. See you, Doki, and everybody else that's still hanging out.
Yeah.
Good night. God bless.
God bless.
Peace. All right, where were we, Sal? Just kidding, bro. I wanted to talk about Noah's Ark really because I was watching that yesterday, and I find it pretty cool.
It's SFT. I mean, faithful, honest, and true. Are you coming on board? A link was sent your way.
Yeah, he just posted the link. He should be here shortly. Where you at, Sal? Where do you live at?
I live on the East Coast
East Coast.
of the
That's
United
pretty
States.
cool, bro. You can go outside right now and look at Mars. It's pretty cool. And if you go around 10 p.m., you can see Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. And they just look like little lights in the sky. They don't look like solid objects at all. I got 2 telescopes.
That's cool. Jason's here. Long time no see, brother.
Yeah, long time no see, man.
What time is it?
Sorry to. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. It's 5:42 p.m.
PM or
Sorry
AM?
to cut you off, Iger.
That's all right, bro. I haven't talked to you in a while too.
Okay.
How you been?
Good.
How's life treating you in Tasmania, man?
Oh, good, good.
I hear it's crazy
Usual.
down there with the lockdowns and stuff like that.
It's
Like
what?
I heard,
Lockdowns. Yeah, it
I
is.
heard it's crazy over there.
Yeah, it is. It's
They come
it's
door
really
to
bad.
door, and they come door to door, and then I mean, I'm pretty sure.
Dan's trying to pass laws like so cops can just kick anybody's door in and just walk into their house without a warrant, without any probable cause, nothing, just if they feel like it.
Make you take a test or what?
Oh, I wonder why I'm getting an echo.
I don't hear an echo, bro. So
Yeah,
it might just be your the connection across the pond over there.
it is. I hear everything you say. I hear it twice. I hear you say it, then I hear it echo.
Sal, do you hear an echo? Sal left.
Hang on.
us. Well, now I'm by myself. So yeah, basically, Earth is about 6,000 years old. There's some discrepancy because if you follow the Septuagint or the Masoronic test, it might be 500 years.
Sit down. Sit down.
Hey, what's up, George?
Oh, sorry, my dog. Sorry, my dog just jumped on me.
Oh, I thought you were telling me to sit down. I'm like, how'd you know?
No. I actually wanted to talk to Sal, but he's gone.
He'll be back because I'm leaving soon. I gotta go. It's almost. Let me see. It's almost.
Hey, Sal, where are you? Oh, he might have gone to the toilet or something.
Take care of something.
Oh, Sal, are you still there?
He said he's gonna go take care of something.
I'll wait for him to come back.
George, you're in Australia.
Yeah, his mum's sick, so that's why he has to leave.
George, you're in Australia too?
I feel sorry for him.
Yes,
man.
I'm in Australia. Yep.
I've been through that sort of thing, not with mum, but dad.
Hey, Jason, you were telling me that they can just come into your door and knock it down, and what do they do at that point?
They're making laws so the police can just enter your house whenever they feel like it.
Do they make you take a test? Is it a mandatory, or how's that going?
No, if the police want to go into your house, they can just kick your door in. If a cop goes past your house and looks at your house and thinks, I want to go into that house and check out if everybody's doing the right thing, they can just go kick your door in and just go in without any warrant, nothing. And also, they're trying to pass a law so government ministers can arrest you like police. Government public servants can arrest you like police. He's insane, mate. Dan Andrews has definitely been paid off by the Communist Party, definitely. And what's really annoying is that they're not even like the opposition and people like that aren't even calling to have the laws repealed. Hardly. There's hardly any noise. Little court case here and there, and that's about it. But It's crazy,
And
man. It's crazy.
And he won't let us view the agreement he has with the Chinese.
So you guys, what do you guys have over there in Australia? Because over here we got Democrats and Republicans. What do you guys have in Australia?
Labor and Liberal.
Say that again.
Labor Party and the Liberal Party. The Liberal
Labor
Party is
Party
liberal is liberal conservatives. The Labor Party is liberal conservatives. Sorry, the Liberal Party is liberal conservatives, and the Labor Party is socialist scumbags.
So you're kind of screwed either way. It sounds like.
Yeah, not really. The Liberal Party is pretty conservative. Like if you look up the true meaning of liberal,
that's funny. That's funny because here the liberals are the bad guys. Over there, the liberals are the good guy.
Yeah, I know, but they're not just
funny,
they're not just liberals. They're liberal conservatives. So it's a liberal conservative. It's not a liberal, like just a liberal. They're mostly conservative. They're pretty much like your Republicans.
Republicans.
Pretty much like your Republicans, and the Labor Party is pretty much identical to your Democrats. So
the liberal. So the liberals
the
in Australia are the good guys, and the Labor Party is the bad guys.
Yeah, the Liberal, the LNP, the Liberal and National Party, but they're just the Liberal Party now. I don't think they're called LNP anymore. But they were a coalition of two parties, but now they're just the Liberal Party conservatives. Yeah, so they are. They're well, not really the good guys because they should be calling to get rid of these laws and stuff, but they're not.
They're both corrupt at this point. Whether it's left or right, it's still the same bird.
I can't understand anything anyone's saying because I'm getting echo. Like every time I say something, about 2 seconds later, it repeats itself in the echo. The whole thing I said and everything that you say, about 2 or 3 seconds after you say it, it repeats itself. Or the whole thing again, not just an echo, but everything I'm saying now, I'm hearing it played back to me like a few seconds delayed. It's crazy.
The Chinese are listening, Jason.
Yeah, that's probably.
Sal,
I'll call it.
Hold on. Can I just talk to Sal for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, man, go for it.
Sal, were you aware that ants don't have any diseases whatsoever? Do you know why?
No, that's news to me. I learned something today.
Wow.
Cool. But you say you don't know why? I'll tell you. Because they have antibodies.
Antibodies.
Oh, it's a joke.
It's just a joke, yeah.
Come on, Sal, you're slow. You're slow.
I am slow. I guess
if your ant population was dying, George Bond, would you think that they've been that they got a virus, or would you think somebody put some poison in the ant pile? We're being poisoned. Food, air, water, it's all. All right, I'm going off the deep end. I probably gotta go.
Guys, I only saw about 5 minutes of the debate, but I caught bits and pieces of the after show. But one of the things that I noticed, and you probably picked it up as well, was the constant interruption that Leophilius was actually doing while Neph was talking. And if you noticed, he was into this genetic fallacy. He was constantly saying, "Oh, but that's from a creationist source," as if creationists can't do biological research like secular science can either.
Nope.
Did you guys get that?
Take historical records into account. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the secular side. They don't take any history into account. All their history starts within the last 100 years. So yeah, bro. When they did ask him a question, he just started laughing and said, "Oh, the guy follows me. He's a troll." And then he never answered it. Neff had to step in and answer it. It was funny, bro. Seculars don't have like a foot to stand on.
You guys have been going for a while. I thought I'd just bring in and with that lighter moment and tell you that joke. I thought I thought Sal might have known that joke, but obviously he didn't.
No. I have a strange sense of humor anyway, so what'll make me laugh might not be what other people will laugh from. So it's
Well,
really.
I got
Plus
one that
it's
might
getting
make
kind
you
of late
laugh.
over here. It's about
I'll
3
send it to
a.m.
you.
here, so I'm kind of running out of gas. So I'm really glad to see you guys.
Go to sleep, man.
Nice.
Go to sleep,
Yeah.
Sal. God bless.
Hey, me too, bro. I'm gonna go with Sal. I do always like to close with Serenity Prayer and the Sinner's Prayer, because in case there's any atheists in the room. But the Serenity Prayer is beautiful. It's God grants us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the strength to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And the Sinner's Prayer is, Dear Lord Jesus, I know that I'm a sinner and I ask for your forgiveness. I believe you died for my sins and rose from the dead. I turn from my sins and invite you to come into my heart and life. I want to trust and follow you as my Lord and Savior. Amen. Good night, guys. It's been real, man. I hope you guys. I hope God comes and intervenes over there, especially across the pond in Australia. Things are getting tough over there. The government is pushing their freaking power claw. And anyways, good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night, Iger.
Man.
Peace.
Oh, I worked out what the echo was. It was just all it was I had the YouTube running, like, you know, when you've got YouTube Premium, you can minimize the screen, and the screen was minimized, and it was playing the sound as well as there's obviously a 3-second delay, so you can beep swear words out and so forth. Obviously, so there's a delay before it gets to YouTube. So that's what it was. I'm a dumbass.
You should mute YouTube, Jason, and then you can be on StreamYard and make comments on YouTube at the same time.
Yeah, I do. I did. That I've got it. That's why but it's good having the premium because one overlaps the other. So, because the thing with StreamYard, Zoom, too bad it's Chinese owned, because Zoom's awesome. Zoom really works well. Because you download an app, if you drop Zoom down from the main screen and go do other things on your phone, if you're on your phone, it doesn't drop out. Whereas StreamYards, if you drop it down, it constantly drops out. It's constantly dropping and dropping and dropping, which is really annoying. So, yeah, I hope StreamYards fixes that problem.
Sal, I was talking to SFT a few weeks ago, and I said it's been a while since we've actually heard or seen Sal for a while. Can you get in touch with him? So obviously he's been in touch with you, and we're really glad to see you again, mate.
Well, thank you. I've been tasked to do work on several papers and projects. So I got a break. We got some of them complete, and I'm almost finished on one. There are 4 more in the future. It's not going to be anti-evolution papers. A lot of them are in different fields like structural biology and bioinformatics, cancer research. So that's the way creationists can move forward, is not to make a direct attack on evolution, but try to do science where we learn about the complexity of biology. So,
well, I was gonna say you have to reset your priorities, but I think you have got your priorities correct, though.
Thank you. Well, I may be devoting the next year to do a lot more internet outreach, particularly for the church. So you may see me more, but I may have my own channel that will be doing talks, not debates like here at this channel. Talks on evidences for the Christian faith, and then I'm going to experiment with trying to do a molecular biology course for the internet with Dr. Change Tan, who is Dr. Rob Stadler's lead author in the book Stairway to Life. So she was actually the one who wrote the first version of Stairway to Life, and then Rob Stadler joined in and helped rewrite a lot of the book to make it more accessible, because the original version was written for PhD scientists. And I read both versions. The first version's also good, but I crawled. I'm like, and I have no understanding of what you just said. That's some really advanced chemical theory. So,
I bought the Kindle version a few weeks ago after the Stadler interview. Actually, after the John Maddox Stadler interview, But I've been concentrating on getting some of these scientists to come into the SFT channel for interviews.
Did you see?
I think we.
I interrupted
Yeah,
you. I'm sorry, George.
No, that's all right. We've been working on Dr. Safadi. I think he'll be on. I think Wednesday or Thursday of this week. And we had Dr. Jackson last week, so that was a real get for us. So we hope to get a few more actually, because those kind of interviews we can actually target specific questions of their expertise that others can actually listen to.
I went to school with Dr. Jackson like 25 years ago, George Mason, and someone we hope might speak here would be Dr. Joe DeWeese. And so I have.
Yes, I've spoken with Joe as well. Joe said he'll be available once his school load eases up a little bit. So expect to see Joe probably later on in the year.
So there's a guy who can talk topoisomerase. So let's see. So they're the crew. Oh, now I remember what I wanted to tell you. Can you look at the acknowledgement section of your Kindle book?
I can't at the moment. I'm on my mobile phone.
But when you do,
I can. I'll go and have a look. Kindle.
You'll see my name there.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you'll see Dr. Tan and Dr. Stadler listed me in the acknowledgments. So just to that made me feel good. I appreciated them acknowledging me.
Was it in fine print or in bold?
Oh, it's just like everyone else. I'm a nobody compared to the other guys listed. Oh my goodness! Did you see the qualifications of the people on the back cover? They're really smart. Oh my goodness! I mean, I thought I was kind of smart until I was around these guys. I mean, that's a pretty stellar list to have in their acknowledgement section. Really bright guys.
Yeah.
I mean, one of them is like a Harvard. She's a Harvard PhD in organic chemistry, and she's a professor. These guys are just stratospheric, and they're on our side, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's awesome, man.
Yeah, we've been trying to get Bill Morgan. We want to do an interview with Bill Morgan, but his asking price is far too high.
Oh. So I mean, like,
are you listening, Bill?
Yeah, Rob Stadler is just like he's an example of someone who's super qualified. A PhD from Harvard, MIT. I mean, he's really, really bright. And I was just laughing when Professor Dave's just like kind of shrugging him off. I'm like, yeah, Professor Dave, who's not even a real professor. So I hope you saw Rob Stadler's takedown of Professor Dave's stuff. That was awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I've watched it twice actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to watch it again too. So I need to check out. I've been part of this channel now. This stream for 3 hours and 37 minutes. So
it's
go
fun.
Go to bed, man. It's getting
really
late there.
Guys.
You got a lot on your plate too, where you look after your mum and that.
Again.
Yes.
Really, I feel for you, man. I've been there looking after my dad, so I know what it's like. Anyway, all right. I'll God bless you, man.
God bless you.
God bless you. God bless you, Sal.
Yeah, God bless you, George, and God bless you, Jason. Take care. Lord willing, we'll see each other again.
Yeah, take care, man.
Well, I'm going to leave too, Jason. I think Standing for Truth needs some sleep.
Yeah, I think so, man. I gotta. Oh well, it can wait till next time. What I got to say is not important anyway. I'm just going to let the stream end. It's been going too long. All right, man. All right, I'll see you later.
No worries, mate. We'll talk to you. Bye.
For all those who appreciate the work that we're doing here on Standing for Truth, please hit that subscribe button.